Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoy this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience.
Emily, a third grader, came home from school with a snowman in her hands that was so small it fit in the palm of her hand. She quickly stuffed the snowman into the freezer, delighted with her ingenuity. She wanted to please her mother, who had been sad and tired at work lately. She worked as a janitor in a huge office where every little thing was scrutinized. In addition, Emily recently learned that her mother, Sarah, is secretly in love with her boss, Frederick Ives. The daughter accidentally overheard her mother talking to her friend. "Gee, Sarah," the friend marveled, "you have to fall in love like that. After all, he's your boss, and you're just a simple cleaning lady. This Frederick is a real handsome man. A good-looking man. A man of fortune. He doesn't even notice people like us. Be careful. You might get burned one of these days." "I know, Tess. I'm not stupid. I'm not stupid," Sarah sighed. "But you can't help what your heart tells you to do." "Have you confessed your feelings to him yet?" Tess asked. "No, of course not." "Have you what?" Sarah exclaimed. "Who am I and who is he? I'd be laughed at by those office hotties if they knew. And Frederick Ives himself doesn't think I'm anything. I'm like a pesky fly to him. When I go into his office to clean, he wrinkles his nose and walks away." "Oh, my advice to you, my dear. Keep your love to yourself," Tess worried. "However, there may be trouble. You have a daughter in your arms, after all. Don't forget that." When Emily went into the kitchen to get some candy, her friends were silent, pretending that nothing had happened. But Emily heard everything. And so in her pretty little head a plan matured: how to get a daddy. Little Emily dreamed of a father as soon as she went to the kindergarten and saw that the other children had not only moms, but also dads who took their kids sledding, made snowballs and drove cars. And the dads were also strong, and that's what her mom lacked. The girl reached out to her dads. She often stood nearby, listening to fathers interacting with their children. This drew the jealousy of the other children upon her. "Get out of here." "That's my daddy," shouted Mike one day, and shoved 4-year-old Emily painfully. "Mike, you can't do that." "You're a man," said his father, and took the crying Emily in his arms. "Are you hurt bad?" "I apologize to my son for being rude." The tears dried instantly. It was the first time she'd ever been in the arms of a daddy, even a stranger, and it felt good. Mom once asked, "Emily, how come other kids have a daddy and I don't?" But Sarah, instead of answering her daughter's direct question, burst into tears right in front of Emily. She gave her a great fright. From then on, the little girl never touched the subject of her father again. She knew with her childish instinct that this question would hurt her beloved mother. But now that her mother had fallen in love, the girl had a real chance to have a father who will become their support in life and will love them both. At least that's what they showed in all the family movies, and Emily was determined to take that chance by all means. "Emily," the teacher called out, "you're in the clouds again. Tell me the answer to the problem." But Emily stood by her desk, blushing with embarrassment. Her daydreaming had caused her to sit through half of her math class. At recess, Sophie, whom Emily had been friends with since first grade, approached her. "Oh, you're going to get in trouble for getting an F," Sophie sympathized. "Why didn't you solve the problem?" The answer was, "There are 2 diggers left. I just wondered," Emily admitted. "My mom's in love, I found out by accident. So here I am wondering how to get that uncle to hook up with my dad. My mom won't tell him anything, but that she loves him, you know. You're the lucky one. You've had a dad all your life, but I never had one. Mommy cries about it all the time. By the way, our dad wanted to leave us," Sophie blurted out, who apparently couldn't keep the family secret anymore. "I'm going to tell you something now, but you don't tell anyone else. Understand?" And seeing Emily nod, she took her girlfriend aside. "When Mom found out Dad had fallen out of love with us, she cried a lot too. And then she went to this powerful sorceress or fortune teller. So she made Daddy fall back in love with Mommy. He didn't love his aunt at his job. And that was it. Now we're like we used to be. But it's a secret, Sophie blabbed. You're not my friend anymore. Wow, how do you find that sorceress? Emily was trembling with anticipation. Well, let me get you the address tomorrow, Sophie promised. Don't you worry, you'll have a daddy. The girls hugged each other and went to class. Now Emily had nothing to stop her from listening to the teacher. She was full of hope and joy. The next day, Sophie brought the address, neatly written down on a piece of paper. For her help, Emily gave her friend her favorite teddy bear, which Sophie had long liked. In short, both parties were satisfied. After school, she went straight to the sorceress, taking with her a picture of her mother and Frederick Ives. The fortune teller lived not far from the school, so Emily made it on foot fairly quickly. The snow swirled, covering the paths, but the girl persevered, wanting to reach her dream. And here showed the green roof of a small, beautiful house, surrounded by an open-work fence. Emily opened the gate, went into a small yard where there were planted miniature fir trees, which created a New Year's atmosphere. Emily paused for a moment and admired the manicured garden. Suddenly, the door opened. A young woman in her 30s with beautifully styled hair and discreet makeup, wearing a white sweater, fashionable jeans, and Uggs appeared on the threshold. She looked questioningly at her guest. Looks more like a snowman than a child, the woman thought. Emily stared at her and couldn't think of anything better to do than crouch down in a curtsy. Hello, little buddy, smiled the woman, who was amused by the child's antics. Looking for something here? Are you lost? Hello, Emily said. Hello. No, I'm not lost. I came here on purpose, looking for a sorceress who can do fortune telling and stuff. Does she live here? Here the landlady looked confused. And would you call her, please? I really need her help, asked Emily. So it's me, the stranger admitted. And what do you need me for? Wait, it's you, Emily wondered. Are sorceresses like that? They have a hooked nose, wispy hair, and a big wart on their cheek. They're also hunchbacked and old and senile, and you're young for a witch. Hearing the childish reasoning, the woman laughed. She definitely liked this brave little girl. Apparently you really need help, since you weren't afraid to come to the scary old woman, she smiled. I hate to break it to you, but the sorceress you're looking for is standing right in front of you. No scary old women in my household. Come on, what's the point of freezing inside? Emily liked it immediately. Crystal lights, light-colored walls and furniture made the interior airy, and the large flowers in floor pots gave the impression of a beautiful garden. On the sofa lay a large cat, who half-idly watched the entrance. How beautiful you have it, Emily gasped. And I thought it would be dark and dirty here. Cobwebs everywhere. A big stove with a huge black cauldron. Yet maybe there's also a broom in the corner that I fly on, laughed the woman again. Well, you've been reading a lot of fairy tales. You've read too many fairy tales. What's your name? My name is Jessica Smith. Jessica is a beautiful name. It must be nice to be called that. And my name is Emily, the guest replied, looking around. Wow, what a kitty. And I asked my mom for a cat, but she won't let me have one. She says it's not enough to clean because of her, but I'll help and clean the litter box and feed it. She doesn't believe me. While Emily was lamenting the absence of a cat in her life, Jessica Smith brought hot tea, sandwiches, and sweets. Here, have some. You must be hungry. I don't have children here, but the goodies are available. I like them myself. Oh, thank you, Emily cheered. She was really hungry. While Emily was getting her treats, Jessica Smith got a better look at her. The girl's clothes were rather shabby, indicating the family's lack of money, but the blouse and skirt were neat. It was obvious that Emily's house was kept clean. Unwittingly, Jessica Smith remembered her childhood, and therefore felt for this spontaneous little girl who had fallen on her head like a snowball. So, Emily, tell me about it. What are you here for? Are you in some kind of trouble? Jessica Smith asked as her guest finished her tea and patted herself contentedly on her stomach. I haven't had a dad my whole life, Emily began to recount confusingly, causing the sorceress to smile involuntarily. And recently my mom fell in love with my uncle, and he doesn't know about it. You wouldn't think it. My mom is very beautiful, but she has to work as a cleaning lady because they won't take her anywhere else. She used to work in an atelier, making beautiful dresses, but then they closed it down. I like this skirt. Seeing Jessica Smith nod her head, Emily continued her story. And yesterday, a friend told me that her mom has fallen in love with her husband again. So I was wondering if you, the witch, Jessica Smith, make the boss love mom and marry her. And then I'll have a daddy too. Does mommy know you came to see me? Jessica Smith asked, amazed at the little girl's intentions. No, it's a surprise, replied Emily. Can you imagine how great it will be when Uncle Frederick wants to marry her? I want so much to see Mama happy. Will you help me? I don't even know what to tell you, said the landlady thoughtfully. How can I do anything without your mother's permission? Oh, and I need pictures of them. Oh, you don't think I'm just saying that. I'll pay for it. I've got some money. I've been saving my pocket money. Here it is, and Emily pulled out a purse with change. Jessica Smith could not resist such naive persuasion, and she liked this little girl who was old enough to be her granddaughter. I don't need your money. I can give it to you for free, you know. Let's say you've paid for your society. After all, I have a grown-up son, a big uncle, but he's not with me now. And he loved chocolate waffles as much as you did. Come on, let's see the pictures. We're gonna make a daddy for you real quick. Emily pulled out the cherished picture, printed on a plain sheet of paper, and handed it to Jessica Smith. When she took the photo, she was horrified. From the slightly blurred image stared back at her the man who had caused Jessica Smith's son to languish in prison. It was he, Frederick Ives, the traitor's son and thief. Jessica Smith's hands trembled. Emily slowly raised a stunned gaze to the woman who, by the look in her eyes, realized that something bad had happened. A silence hung in the air, which was broken by the shrewd girl. And why are you silent? Do you know him? My girl, said Jessica Smith, I can't tell you much, but I will tell you one thing. That man is evil himself. He's not just bad, he's horrible. And I'm not talking about his looks. I'm talking about his behavior, his actions. You're too young for me to tell you my secret, so don't take offense at me. But I know this man will bring any woman, even your mom, so much grief. It's better to live without a daddy than with a monster in the same house. How can he turn into a monster? Emily gasped. He can, but not for real, like in fairy tales, but in a figurative sense. You know, replied Jessica Smith, he's a scary person on the inside. Yeah, I get it, Emily frowned, mean, nasty, probably like our bully Max, who hurts everyone. Good for you, smiled the woman, laying out the solitaire. You're so small, but you think almost like an adult. Don't worry, your mom will find happiness. The road to it will be hard, so the cards say, but it's gonna be okay. Emily calmed down. I'll wait. You know what? Come visit me anytime, Jessica Smith offered. We'll chat and drink tea with you, okay? I'll do that, Emily said excitedly. It's not far from the school. The hostess gathered her a small bag of treats and walked her all the way to the gate. Emily gave Jessica Smith a hug, and she was surprised. It had been a long time since she had seen her son, and she had grown stale. But this little girl could warm her from the cold and loneliness. Emily left, and Jessica Smith stared after her for a long time. Left alone, she wondered how it was that fate had sent this innocent child to her, so that Jessica could protect the little girl and her mother. Just as Jessica had once failed to save her son, I'll help, Jessica Smith decided. In fact, she wasn't always a sorceress and hadn't practiced card divination before. Little Jessica was taught all these wisdoms by her gypsy grandmother, who saw in the girl a bit of her abilities. Grandmother Laura at one time abandoned the Tabor for a handsome military man, Jessica Smith's grandfather, but her magical abilities remained with her. Who knows, maybe that's why the calm, poised junior lieutenant rose to general. Grandma was feared by officers' wives when she lived in the barracks. They attributed all the troubles to her, from childhood whooping cough to accidents at firing ranges. What can you do? People are weak and used to blame anyone but themselves for their troubles, and the beautiful gypsy woman knew it very well. Here in her adored granddaughter Jessica, Laura from childhood taught to see through people, to scatter cards for divination, and learn the past and the future. And if the girl had tried harder, instead of learning all these wisdoms by rote, she would have become no less powerful seer than her grandmother. Why do I need all this? Jessica laughed as her grandmother made her learn the meaning of the cards. We live in the modern world, not the Middle Ages. This, as you say, nonsense will give you a piece of bread in hard times, Grandma replied seriously, and snapped her fingers in front of her granddaughter's nose. It's not black magic I'm teaching you. It's the simplest thing that every self-respecting gypsy woman should know, but I'm not a gypsy, Jessica argued. My hair is russet. Look, you're a gypsy since you have my blood in your veins. Laura was angry and threatened her granddaughter with her fist so that the earrings around her neck shook. Learn what you're told. It will come in handy for you. What kind of naughty child is growing up? Now, remembering her grandmother over a cup of tea in her cozy home in the middle of a snowy street, Jessica Smith smiled involuntarily. How right you were, my sweet granny, she thought, but somehow she knew, and tears of sadness flowed from her eyes, whether it was because she was sorry for her bygone youth, or because her son was far away from her, or maybe it was both. When he was sent to prison on Frederick Ives' denunciation, Jessica didn't know what to do. Her hands sank with grief and the unbearable thought that her innocent son had been so cruelly punished for the treachery and theft of another man who had gone unpunished. But Frederick himself offered Alexander, Jessica's son, to create a firm where Alexander would be the president of the company and Frederick his assistant. Business was booming, the money flowed. But one not the best day for his son came to the police, taken away in the middle of the night, accused of non-payment of taxes and laundering huge sums. Alexander was in shock because the repayment of loans and taxes followed his assistant and comrade Frederick, who, as it later turned out Jessica Smith conducted her own investigation, was involved in a conspiracy against the owner of the company in order to seize it. But the police did not look into it thoroughly. The case, she was told, was closed, and no matter how hard her mother fought hiring lawyers, nothing changed. Frederick was backed by his powerful father, who of course knew all about it. Then Jessica Smith was fired from her job as an economist, arrogantly, on the grounds that she had embezzled from their accounts. Jessica realized who was behind it, and that was the final straw. Nicholas. She remembered her husband. Why did you leave this world so soon? It is hard to bear the blows of fate without you. Our son was taken away, and Jessica sank into depression. She didn't want to go out, didn't want to socialize with anyone. She neglected her household and only lay in bed until Grandma Laura came to her in a dream. Come on, pull yourself together, Laura shouted at her granddaughter. Why are you sagging like a wet rag? You need to be strong. You have a special gift, so use it. Remember what I taught you. Now go and eat. Build up your strength. Happiness must be fought for. Jessica Smith woke up from her sleep and was surprised to find herself sitting in the kitchen eating homemade sausage without bread. And there was nothing tastier than that homemade sausage. That's when Jessica decided to become a sorceress and fortune teller. As soon as she placed one ad, people came in droves. People wanted to know about their future. From then on, Jessica Smith's business was booming. She was earning many times more than in her previous job and could send good packages to her son in prison. She worried about Emily's fate. What if Frederick was up to some scam again and extreme the girl's mom? Jessica Smith had learned the nature of the scoundrel. He rubbed himself into a man's confidence and then put him in his place. You can do anything with a woman in love. She won't even notice because she'll be thinking with her heart, not her mind. So Jessica Smith made up her mind. She had to expose the crook so that his dirty deeds would be found out by his own employees and they would no longer trust him. She put on her best outfits and visited the best hair and makeup artist, then went to the office where Frederick and Emily's mom worked. May I see Frederick Ives? Jessica Smith asked sternly to the guard on duty. The guard had no problem letting the elegant woman into the supervisor's office, mistaking her for a relative or business associate. Frederick sat with his feet on the desk, watching a soccer game. Hello, Frederick, she said, entering without knocking and purposely leaving the door open for others to hear. And I see you're in your repertoire, taking a vacation while others work and are responsible for your progress. Oh, Frederick's eyes bulged as he saw the one he dreaded more than any other person in the world. Good afternoon. What do you want? What can I do for you?
Let's see how you can help, dear Frederick, exclaimed the unhappy mother. I want my son to get out of the prison into which he was put in your place. That is one thing. And you can help me by appearing before justice and taking his place. That's 2. And 3, you give the company to the rightful owner, Alexander Sokolovsky. My son.
Security. Detain Jessica Smith's security. Take that woman out and never let her in here again, Frederick shouted. Scream, scream, Frederick. Just know this. I've cursed you now. There will be no happiness for you. From this very moment, Jessica Smith shouted out, By the way, I am a hereditary sorceress. Didn't you know that? You shouldn't have taken a swing at my family. I'm not afraid of any witches. It's all the nonsense of a crazy old woman, Frederick exclaimed. He discreetly spat over his left shoulder. When the guards came running in the person of an elderly officer on duty, they were afraid to hurt the witch for fear of a curse. But they didn't have to kick the woman out. Jessica Smith felt sick. Her heart couldn't take the strain, and she collapsed right into the guard's arms. Get her out of here, Frederick shouted. Where am I going to put her away? It's not trash. It's a human being, shouted the guard. We should call an ambulance. Help, call an ambulance. But everyone stood and just stared at what was happening, afraid to move under the fierce gaze of the supervisor. Jessica Smith collapsed, collapsing on top of a guard who barely had time to pick her up. No one volunteered to help, and the hapless duty officer didn't know what to do. Hello, ambulance, someone did call on the phone. Come urgently. A woman here is not well. It must be her heart. Sarah ran into the office. Rushing over to the emotionless Jessica Smith, she unbuttoned her jacket and the collar of her blouse to make it easier to breathe. There's a doctor coming now. Water. Give me water, the woman shouted. Someone handed over a carafe. Sarah scooped up a handful of cold water and splashed the injured woman's face and neck. What's wrong with me? Where am I? Jessica Smith woke up. Who are you? I'm Sarah, the cleaner replied, and breathed a sigh of relief. I clean the floors here. What are you getting so excited about? You need to take care of yourself. Stay with me, Jessica Smith asked and looked at Sarah gratefully when she saw her nod her head in the affirmative. That's how they sat holding hands until the doctors arrived. If you don't leave now, consider yourself fired, and you may not come back, Frederick Ives told Sarah through gritted teeth. But that woman needs help, doesn't she? You can't just leave her. Just like that, Sarah wondered, not believing her ears. She had no idea about this dark side of her boss, so Sarah walked off to the ambulance. The stranger had caught her eye with something. Maybe it was the look of immeasurable grief in her eyes. Or maybe it was that she didn't want to be among those indifferent people who watched in silence as she felt sick. Jessica Smith was placed in a ward, and Sarah brought her own things from home, pajamas, slippers, and a robe. The rest of her personal supplies she bought on the way to the hospital. What a thoughtful daughter, said her roommates. She organized everything quickly. That's not my daughter. I just met her today, Jessica replied, much to her roommate's surprise. But she herself was very pleased to be in Sarah's care. Jessica Smith realized that Sarah was Emily's mother. Now I see who the little girl is, so smart, and she thought, and smiled. Why did you show up? Frederick Ives menacingly asked Sarah when she had just started cleaning the room. You're fired. Get out. The staff stopped work and watched in fear at the picture of the janitor's humiliation. No one stood up for her, afraid of losing their place in a company more like hard labor. You're firing me for saving a man, Sarah asked. What about you? If you got sick and everyone was standing there just goggle-eyed, how can you be so soulless? Switched to shouting, Sarah realized she had nothing more to lose. Fired without severance pay, shrieked Frederick Ives, unaccustomed to being rebuffed by his subordinates. What a defender of the poor. Fuck you and choke on your pennies, Sarah shouted and poured the dirty water from the bucket right on the boss's expensive shoes. She picked up her bag and threw her lab coat at the feet of the gawkers, who were delighted by what they saw. but carefully tried to hide it under the masks of condemnation of the rebellious cleaner. Everyone quietly hated their boss, but were afraid to say so. It wasn't until she was outside that Sarah was able to breathe freely. Now she knew where to go. "Hello, convalescents," Sarah said cheerfully as she entered Jessica Smith's room. "How are you doing?" The sick women began to talk excitedly about their problems. Many had never been visited. Sarah wrote down their wishes in a notebook, promising to buy the little things they asked for. "Hello, my savior," Jessica smiled. "Why are you here in the middle of the workday?" "Got fired," the woman informed her. "Fired how?" Jessica Smith exclaimed. "And for what? Frederick Ives scandalized me for helping you," replied Sarah. "I told you he was a bad man," Jessica exclaimed heartily. She immediately stopped talking, realizing she had spoken out of turn. "And how do you know my daughter, and how is she related to my boss?" Sarah wanted an explanation. There was nothing to do. Jessica Smith had to come clean and tell everything about Frederick Ives, her son, and Sarah herself. "Now you know everything," Jessica sighed. "I didn't think you and I would meet like this." Emily wanted to introduce us herself. "She and I are friends. She comes to visit me after school. We do homework, drink tea, and talk about stuff." "So that's the grandmother she goes to," Sarah laughed. "I thought she was visiting a friend. They have a grandmother there too." "Thank you. My daughter is so much calmer and happier. I didn't even know she was looking for a fiancé. Her father left me when I was pregnant, and then he died in a drunken brawl." "I can't say that." "And you come see me after you're discharged," Jessica Smith suggested. "We'll stick together, help each other out." Speaking of help, some well-to-do acquaintances of mine need a maid. They pay well. Maybe you'd like to go. "Sure. That would be nice," Sarah said excitedly. "Then call this number." Jessica Smith wrote the numbers on a piece of notepaper. "Tell them it's from me. Also take the keys to the house. I have a cat there. Oh, and Emily likes to play with it after school. Anyway, don't be shy." And Sarah left satisfied that she had such an acquaintance, and soon she had a job. Sarah began to put the house in order, and suddenly she came across Alexander's letter, where the mother tells him about the girl Emily, that she visits her after school. After a little thought, Sarah decided to end it by saying that Jessica Smith was now in the hospital. Sarah, Emily's mother, is looking after her. She sealed the letter and took it to the post office and sent it by registered mail so that it would reach the colony. Then she remembered the telephone number Jessica Smith had given her. She was welcome on the other end of the line and made an appointment for tomorrow in a wealthy part of town. When Sarah arrived at the address, she was amazed at the beauty of the building. The only thing that frightened her was the kind of people who lived there. The only rich man she met turned out to be a thief and a hypocrite. Therefore, stepping on the threshold of the house, Sarah inwardly prepared for the boorishness of the owners. But this did not happen. "Hello," a pretty woman walked towards her. "You've come at last. I can't cope with the household anymore. The thing is, we recently moved here, and the house is too big for me to clean by myself, and I have twin 1-year-old sons I can't eat, let alone scrub the floors. Make yourself at home. At your disposal, everything you see. Any appliances, household chemicals, products. Don't be shy. Meals are on us. The fridge is full. If you will also prepare dinner for your husband's arrival, I'd be very grateful. And I'll pay, of course," Sarah said with a sigh of relief. "And what is the fee for the month?" When Sarah found out how much they were going to pay for household help as well, she was delighted. The amount was noticeably more than she was getting from Frederick. Thus began a new page in her life, and soon Jessica Smith was discharged from the hospital, and the house was ready for her arrival. Alex wrote a letter back to Sarah, where he was glad that such a kind woman was looking after his mother. After the first paycheck, her mother was able to buy Emily a dress and shoes, which she had been dreaming of for a long time. The girl's joy was unbounded. "Look what my mom bought me, a dress." Flew into the room happy Emily and spun around in front of Jessica Smith. "Oh, it's so pretty." The latter splashed her hands. "You look like a princess in it." Only there's something missing, and Jessica pulled a small pearl necklace out of the jewelry box. "Take it as a memento of me," she said quietly. "I never had a granddaughter, but you have. Wear it. Remember me, little girl, and lest you doubt that I gave you such a dear thing, I'll sign a card for you. It's New Year's Eve in 2 weeks, and this will be my present." A couple minutes later, Emily was showing off in a gorgeous pearl necklace with the cherished card in her hand. It seemed to her that all this splendor, the dress, the grandmother, the jewelry, was not happening to her right now, but on the other side of town. Sarah, who was valued and respected at work, was happy. The young landlady was as hands-off without her, and the owner marveled at the home-cooked meals Sarah was preparing. Refusing to pay extra for cooking, she believed that she was already generously paid, and therefore did not want anything. Besides, Sarah had peace of mind about her daughter, who was under the sensitive care of Jessica Smith. One day, Sarah received a phone call. "Good evening," a pleasant male voice said into the receiver. "Is this Sarah?" "Yes, who is it?" she replied, slightly surprised. "My name is Alex. You wrote to me, remember?" he asked. "Hello, Alex. I completely forgot I gave you my number. Is something wrong?" "No, don't worry," he replied. "I had time for a call, so I thought I'd take advantage of the moment. I already called my mom. She and Emily are doing fine." "How are you doing? After your former assistant Frederick kicked me out of my job, your mom helped me out a lot. Turns out there are some good rich people out there. They're very fond of me, and they pay me well. When I get out of jail, which will be pretty soon, I'll pay you back for the good," Alex said after a little silence. "What you're doing for my mom is priceless to me. Thank you, and I hope to see you soon and maybe become friends." The call cut off. Apparently, the prisoner's talking time was strictly limited. Sarah felt sorry for Alex. After all, he had suffered for nothing. She sighed and set about preparing dinner for the hosts and some important guests they had mentioned this time. Sarah decided to impress everyone with goose and apples. An appetizing aroma wafted throughout the house. When the host appeared on the doorstep with his future business partner, a painfully familiar voice sounded. "What a smell," I'm salivating. "What kind of sorceress is working in your kitchen?" "That's our assistant. She really has golden hands," boasted the owner. "My wife can't get enough of it." And then Sarah realized who the guest was. The porcelain cup fell out of her hand and shattered. "What happened?" Tess, the hostess, asked. "You didn't hurt yourself." Men came into the dining room. One of them blushed thickly when he saw Sarah. It was Frederick Ives. "Is this where you decided to confront me with this scoundrel?" she exclaimed. "I don't understand you," marveled the landlord. "What kind of reaction is that? Sarah is my wife's assistant. The whole house is on her, and you have something against that." "Yes," Sarah said. "That man is against all decent people. He kicked me out of my job just because I called a doctor for an elderly woman who wasn't feeling well." The homeowners stood frozen, horrified as they watched their guest attack the innocent housekeeper. However, they did not stop attacking, apparently fearing to offend an important business partner on whom their welfare depended. But they didn't want to lose such a good employee either. Sarah understood that. "You disobeyed me," Frederick yelled. "You meddled in the wrong business. Throw her out now." "All you can do is kick her out," Sarah grinned. "Don't bother. I'll leave on my own." "And don't yell, you idiot. You're scaring the kids. Thanks to this house, I'll go to the other one." And she walked resolutely out of the kitchen. The landlady ran after her, apologizing for not being able to keep Sarah working here. She had paid a generous retreat, enough for her and her children to live comfortably for several months. The whole unpleasant story had knocked Sarah out of her mind. Angry tears poured down her cheeks and froze in the cold. How lucky she was to have such a friend and advocate as Jessica Smith. She calmed down, remembering her, and picked up her pace. The entrance to Jessica Smith's house was visible in the snow. And to open the doors, Sarah had to get a shovel from the shed and shovel the path and porch. That's odd, she thought. Jessica Smith hadn't left the house since yesterday. That didn't sound like her. The house was dark and stuffy. So after opening the curtains and letting the rays of morning light into the room, Sarah made her way to the older woman's bedroom. "Jessica Smith, are you home?" Sarah asked, but no one answered. She was beginning to worry, but where could an avid homebody go? Sarah walked into the bedroom and saw something that made her heart clench with unbearable pain. A scream ripped from her chest. A shiver ran through her body as if she had been electrocuted. Jessica Smith lay in bed with her eyes open. She was dead. In her hand was a crumpled piece of paper. "Jessica Smith! How could it be?" Sarah screamed, and tears hailed from her eyes. Grief was choking her, gripping her throat. "How could it be, my good girl? Everything was fine. What can we do? What about Alex, your son, who was supposed to be back soon, and Emily loves you so much?" Sarah sobbed over the body of a woman she didn't recognize as her mother. An ambulance was called to transport the deceased to the morgue, and Sarah stayed at Jessica Smith's house. She looked around. Everything was just as it had been when the landlady was alive. Suddenly, a piece of paper lying on the bed caught her attention. Sarah picked it up and with a sinking heart began to read. Terror seized her. The letter was from the colony. It said that Alex had been crushed by a log while logging and had died. "So that's what caused it," Sarah exclaimed. Alex had died, and Jessica Smith, upon learning of her son's death, couldn't handle the grief. She cleaned up and went to prepare dinner for Emily, who was about to arrive. Sarah's cooking was automatic, subconsciously wanting to breathe life into this house. It was what Jessica Smith would have wanted, and she had decided to stay here until the heirs were found. It was too miserable to let go of the beautiful winter garden that the owner had grown with so much love, and the cat needed care. It was as if he sensed the trouble in the air, and was always near Sarah, as if looking to her for support. "I'm here." Emily stood on the doorstep, shaking off her snow cap. "Oh, Mom, what are you doing here?" Not at work. Sarah didn't know how to tell her daughter that her Aunt Jessica was gone. She stood there sobbing silently. Emily suddenly ran into the living room and then, smelling food in the kitchen, asked bluntly, "What? Is she in the hospital?" And seeing her mom waggle her head negatively through her tears, she asked, "Is she dead?" The baby's sorrowful crying filled the house. The little girl had faced heavy grief too soon. Her mother hugged her and quietly reassured her. "That's life. Emily, everyone has their time." Jessica Smith would have been happy if she had known that those who loved her were grieving for her. She didn't die alone. She had us when she had calmed down a little. Her mother suggested that she stay at Jessica Smith's house. The girl accepted. About Alex's death to her daughter, she did not say anything, fearing for the fragile psyche of the child. It was good that Emily always had a cat by her side to comfort her. Turning around, the prison doctor said to Alex, "Lucky you, Smith, the log hit you tangentially. Your namesake wasn't so lucky, he took his breath away, yay." "Lucky," Alex said. "My arm still hurts." "That's why I'm here." The doctor scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. "That call came from someone named Sarah. She's demanding to release your body for burial." "What?" Alex wondered. "You'll have to excuse me, but our secretary got it all mixed up and buried another Alex instead of one Alex, sending the funeral to the wrong family," said the doctor. "My mother will go crazy with grief," Alex shouted. "Call and cancel this circus." That was the point. Alex was called. The doctor fell silent. "Your mother passed away yesterday. I'm sorry to hear that. What do you mean?" Alex staggered back. The realization that in an instant he had become an orphan hamstrung his legs, taking away all his strength. His head spun with the horrible news. He never said another word. And in the evening he escaped from the infirmary, hiding in a box of dirty linen, which was taken to the laundry by the prison machine. Once free, escaped convict Alex Sokolovsky got some clothes and traveled back to his hometown. He wanted to make it to his mother's funeral. Jessica Smith's burial was modest. There were few people at the funeral itself, including Sarah, who had organized everything out of the money her landlady had given her. Sarah stood silently by the fresh grave and wept. She felt sorry for Aunt Jessica, who had done so much for her. When everyone had gone, Emily placed a small snowman on the mound of earth, like the one she kept in the freezer at home. "She'll have more fun that way," Emily explained. "Mom, Aunt Jessica will know we love her." Sarah didn't argue. By this time, Alex was on his way into town. He avoided crowded places because he knew very well that he was immediately wanted. Alex didn't feel any cold. He was burning with unbearable pain for his mother, whom he was not allowed to say goodbye to. The burning hatred for the one who had put him in prison gave him strength. Alex walked from the outskirts of the city to his home, hiding from patrol cars in dark back alleys and yards. And finally he saw a nice garden with a low fence and a house, so dear beloved, where his mother was no longer there. This thought burned him like a red-hot iron. Only now, seeing his childhood home, he fully realized what grief had befallen him. Tears streamed down his face. "Mom, no one will ever ask again, Alex, son, how are you doing? Are you hungry?" The light was on in the house. Alex didn't dare go in. He was afraid it was an ambush. He would be arrested and returned to prison. However, he was tormented by the unknown. He didn't know when and where Jessica Smith would be buried, so he decided to wait. An hour later, a girl of about 9 years old came out of the house. Alex was surprised. He had never seen this child near her mother. Trying to get a better look at the little guest, he reached out and pushed aside a branch. The snow from his hat fell directly on his head and over his scruff. The cold burned the skin on the back of his neck. Alex let out a little gasp, and it was enough to reach the child's keen hearing. She turned in the direction of the noise and spotted a man behind a tree, who froze fearfully in anticipation. "Uncle, who are you?" Emily, to Alex's surprise, wasn't scared at all. On the contrary, stepped towards him. "My name is Alex. I used to live in this house," he whispered. "So you're Uncle Alex," Emily smiled. "So you're Aunt Jessica's son." "And I'm Emily." Alex was surprised at the unfamiliar little girl's awareness. "And how do you know my mom?" he asked. "I used to visit her, and then my mom started being friends with her." When the girl mentioned death, he stammered, and his lips quivered. "Mom and I stayed here to take care of the house and the cats until the new owners came, and here you've come. Let's go home." Kids, that simple question hit Alex like a shoe on the head. It had been so long since anyone had called him to eat or called him Alex. "No, I can't. I have to get to my mom's funeral on time," he said. "Oh," the girl said, "we buried her yesterday." Alex was hit with a suffocating wave of regret for not having time to say goodbye to his mother. Falling to his knees, he covered his face with his hands and sobbed. Emily ran up to him and wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close. "Don't cry." Aunt Jessica didn't like crying. Emily was cheerful and, stroking his head, added, "Go to the cemetery. You'll recognize her grave at once." Mom decorated it with a big bouquet of red roses. "And there's my snowman, just like this one." And she pointed to a big snowman with a carrot instead of a nose. "We made it together." Alex looked at the snowman. He used to make those with his mom, too. Anger at the culprit of all this trouble boiled up in his chest. "Thank you, Emily," he said. "You've been a great help to me. Yes, I'll visit my mom's grave and whoever is responsible. I promise he'll be in a lot of trouble. He'll answer for everything." Having hugged Emily goodbye, Alex took confident steps and, not hiding much anymore, and went to Frederick's office in New York, the very office that knew Jafai, the very office that had been so unfairly taken from him. No, he wasn't sorry for the stolen company or his millionaire status. He was infinitely sorry for the lost years he had spent away from his mother, who had died of grief. And he should have been buried so soon, Emily said businesslike, taking off her boots. Uncle Alex got upset and went to deal with the uncle who's to blame for everything. He's definitely going to be in trouble. Who got upset? Sarah's hands shook with shock. Uncle Alex, Emily explained calmly. First he got scared when he saw me, then he cried, and then for some reason he got really angry and went off somewhere. Look at this picture. Sarah showed a framed picture of Alex, taking it from the mantel. Is that him? Yes, Emily said, only he's younger here. So he's not dead, Sarah exclaimed. So Jessica Smith got the wrong information. My goodness, I think I know what he's up to. We've got to warn Frederick. Sarah didn't really care about Frederick and his safety. She felt sorry for Alex, who could have gotten himself into trouble and gone to jail for more time. So this was a mistake she had to correct for the sake of Jessica Smith's memory. Frederick Ives, she shouted into the phone. It's Sarah. You again, he replied grudgingly. What do you want? He's coming. Alex is coming to see you. How? Yelled Frederick fearfully. Did they let him out? Without answering, Sarah was already running to her former office to prevent tragedy. There was no telling what Alex was prepared to do in his state of shock. But she wasn't in time. Alex was already in the lobby, where the staff looked at him, dressed in an old jacket and jeans, with bewilderment. The guard was new and didn't know the firm's former director, and so Alex wasn't let through. Who are you here to see? The older security guard asked. I need to see Frederick Ives, but on a personal matter, Alex replied discreetly. Making a sign to wait, the guard called his superior. Frederick Ives, you have a visitor, said it's a personal matter. When Frederick realized who had come to see him, he panicked. He opened the safe and began frantically going through documents. He pulled out a thick folder, opened it, and began flipping through the papers as if they were where his salvation lay. At that minute, Frederick heard the elevator on his floor open. Then, frightened that it was coming for him, he rushed out of his office and into the security room, forgetting to lock the safe and put away the secret folder. On the way, he almost ran into Sarah, who stepped out of the elevator and headed for the receptionist's office. She entered the office and, assessing the mess, realized Frederick had chickened out and escaped, which meant Alex was already here. They'd just missed each other. A bright yellow folder labeled for official use caught Sarah's eye. She opened it and realized from the first lines that it was evidence against Frederick. It contained all the documents proving the machinations of the criminal scheme Ives had used to take the company away from Alex and put him on trial. Carefully photographing each sheet on her phone, she tucked the valuable gadget into the inside pocket of her jacket. After all, it could save Alex from jail. Now it was just a matter of finding him. The perpetrator of the commotion did not wait for the police to arrive, but walked out of the office with a quick step, trying not to attract the attention of visitors. Now he wanted to go to his mother's grave. The way to the cemetery lay across a small lake, but no sooner had he crossed the bridge than he heard desperate sounds and screaming. A boy was choking and screaming. He had fallen through the ice and was drowning. There was no time to think. Hey kid, shouted Alex on the run. I'm coming. You hear me. Hang on. Unwinding the scarf, he held it out to the boy and cautiously crawled to the edge of the ice hole. The boy grabbed the end of the scarf, carefully pulling him toward him. Alex tugged the boy out of the hole with a jerk. Thank you, the boy whispered through gritted teeth. You got it, Alex smiled. He was glad he'd saved the man's life. Then it hadn't all been for nothing. Let me wrap you up in my jacket. Are you from the village? The boy nodded. Alex ran that way, and a police car with a siren was already chasing him. He stopped. The child's life was more precious than his own freedom. The policeman got out of the car and, correctly assessing the situation, put Alex, who was holding the boy to himself to keep him warm, in the cabin, and then rushed to the village straight after the paramedic. For the courage shown during the rescue of the child, as well as taking into account the special reasons that prompted the escape, it is decided to pardon Alex Sokolovsky and not to punish him for escaping from the colony, read the warden. The court ruling. Well, Alex, you're our hero. You're still lucky. What a beautiful woman came to see you today. You can go on your date. You have 2 hours. Intrigued, Alex walked out of the boss's office and headed for the dating room. There he saw Sarah. I'm sorry, but I don't know you. There must be some kind of mistake, Alex said. But I know an absentia from your mom and my daughter, so we know each other. I've texted you, she smiled. So you are the Sarah, Alex rejoiced. Thank you for coming. Sarah could see that Alex was easy to talk to, a nice person just like his mother. When she showed the photo of the documents, she realized she had done the right thing. Alex was just shaking with joy. What a smart girl you are. Please, let's hire a lawyer. The money is lying around the house. They're hidden in the cat's jar. You'll see everything will be fine. So how are you living? I wish Jessica Smith had lived to see this day, Sarah lamented. Also, I almost threw that old Ken away yesterday. The cat wouldn't let me because he's smart, Alex laughed. How's Emily doing? Here sent you all her candy. Said you ran away hungry. I brought you some cutlets and pies. Eat up, and you're so thin. Alex was pleased with such care. His heart slowly began to thaw, freeing itself from evil. That's what happens when a person has hope. The lawyer got his case reconsidered, presenting new evidence of his client's innocence since the court took into account all the arguments and restored Alex in the rights of the president of the company, also obliging Frederick, New York, to pay all lost profits, as well as moral damage in the form of compensation for the lost years of life in prison and mental suffering. Frederick himself went to the colony on a full program. When the prison gates closed behind Alex's back, he felt the warm May breeze. It was the wind of freedom. Alex turned around and saw Sarah, who was holding Emily's hand. The girl was wearing a simple dress, and her mother's family necklace adorned her thin neck. He realized this was his mother letting him know that they were family now. Emily snatched her hand out of her mother's grasp and ran to Alex, squatting down. Alex pulled her against him, and she wrapped her arms around his neck. You wouldn't happen to be my daddy, would you? She whispered in his ear. I've been waiting for you so long.
If you want me to be, I will be, Alex replied.
He took her in his arms and walked towards Sarah, my daughter, and I have decided to become a family here. Seriously, Alex said. Are you okay with us? Sarah smiled. Of course I'm in. Sarah returned to her former office already as manager and wife of the head of the company. The honest employees were delighted with the change in leadership, and those who had stood idly by and indulged when Frederick bullied Sarah and Alex's mother were immediately fired. The company was set on a course of growth and prosperity, led by an experienced executive. Jessica was given a beautiful monument in the form of an angel made of white marble. Next to a vase full of fresh flowers stood a small homemade snowman that Emily had made. The girl was still grieving for her favorite aunt. Together with Alex, they often visited the grave. When Alex and Emily were returning home, the father asked his daughter, "What if you get a baby sister? How do you look at that?" "I'm looking good," clapped Emily's hands together. "I even know what we're going to name her." "And what's that?" "Jessica. It's such a flower."
Max hasn't been to the small town where he was born and raised for a long time. Most of his life was spent here. The man spent almost a decade and a half in the capital. Once upon a time, he literally ran away to a big, noisy city, trying to hide from almost physical pain, disappointment, and bitterness. It was hard because I had to immediately solve a huge number of issues with housing, work, and so on. It was necessary to rebuild my life. All these worries distracted me and prevented me from plunging into black melancholy. Gradually, everything got better. Max came back to life. Now he has a large apartment in Washington, a high-paying job, even his own small business, which brings in more and more profit every year. And most importantly, Max has a new family, his beloved, loving wife, Veronica, and 2 wonderful twin daughters. Veronica is younger than Max. Perhaps this is precisely why, with her, he feels like a support and the head of the family. The young wife does not work, takes care of the house and children, and Max is the breadwinner and protector. An ideal model of social cell. With Helen, it was not like that at all. Max still didn't understand how to relate to his first wife. At first, when everything first happened, he both loved and hated her at the same time. It was an explosive mixture of feelings and emotions. Now the man has long calmed down. He has his own life, his own affairs and problems, but he still could not remember his ex-wife indifferently. Resentment, despair, disgust, and even hatred were replaced by a feeling of guilt, primarily in front of the children. I haven't seen Max's sons even once since he left Otradnoy at night from the only roadhouse at the ready. The man then, barely holding back tears, fought the desire to hit and destroy everything in order to give vent to his emotions. Would Max succeed in something in a new place, or would he disappear in the big city, disappear from the face of the earth? He hardly cared then. He was not in that state. The main thing is to stay away from Helen and preferably never hear or think about her again. It hurts too much. Trouble came to Max's measured life unexpectedly for him. Although his wife later assured that she had warned him many times and asked for attention and care. Well, yes, there was something like that, but Max didn't even pay attention to his wife's slight grumbling. It seemed to him that it was all from fatigue. Still, he maintains a large house and manages to look after the children. Of course, it's exhausting. Helen constantly demanded something from Max, and he dressed, in her opinion, incorrectly and joked inappropriately and behaved incorrectly with the children and did not help much around the house, and in general constantly shifted the solution of everyday issues to her, to his other half. Max did not take all these reproaches seriously. All wives scold their husbands, even the best ones. This is par for the course. So Helen grumbles with or without reason. Max considered himself an ideal family man. Firstly, most of the budget was on him. He worked long hours at his factory, often picking up extra shifts, and also that his family does not need anything. The man sincerely believed that this was quite enough. Helen, if she wanted, could not work at all. They wouldn't be luxurious, but they wouldn't die of hunger either. Max's salary would be enough for them all. But at first, the wife could not even think about leaving her school, where she worked as an English teacher. Max saw that she liked her work and had nothing against Helen, even at the expense of her everyday life, doing what she loved so much. And a certain amount in the family budget will never be superfluous. And Max took care of the children enough. Even as a child, he promised himself that he would not be like his own father. At first, he did not notice his only son and was absolutely indifferent to him. And then, when Max went to school and completely disappeared somewhere, it seems that he transferred small money to his mother, but he himself did not appear in his son's life. Of course, the mother did not skimp on expressions when discussing her former husband. Max knew from an early age what a scoundrel, traitor, and generally terrible person his father was. For some reason, hearing this was always painful and offensive. For a reason unknown to him, Max wanted to protect and justify his father. But arguing with your mother is not a good thing. Yes, and she's right. Their father really abandoned them, and even then, as an 8-year-old boy, Max made a promise to himself he would never be like his father, and so it turns out he did no better. When the resentment against his wife subsided, Max's heart began to ache for Stephen and Mary. They weren't to blame for anything at all. The thought that it would be necessary to establish communication with them often occurred to Max, but the children probably hate their father, who left them many years ago, so they won't even want to talk to him, most likely, and they will be right. I met Helen and Max at the birthday party of their mutual friend. It was a fun party at the Dasha. A lot of young people, loud music, laughter, dancing, wine flowing. We fried meat and walked along the riverbank at night. It was great. Max noticed Helen almost immediately. She's so modest, quiet compared to the other girls, and beautiful. No, not the beauty that was fashionable at that time, but as if from some kind of such faces can be found in Renaissance portraits. It wasn't that Max was particularly interested in art, but the teacher at their college was Helen in love with her subject. She managed to interest future welders in both painting and sculpture. So Max did understand something after all. So Helen amazed him from the very beginning. Big eyes, long, slightly wavy hair, slender figure. The most important thing is the look. It was immediately clear from him that he was a kind and sensitive person. Helen didn't flirt with Max or other young men like other girls, but sometimes the guy caught her eye. It was pleasant and exciting. Max understood that he should approach her and start a conversation, but he did not dare. He had no problems with other girls, and he joked with them easily. He could even afford to hug each of them. But Helen, she's completely different. How to approach it? Suddenly, when Max starts a conversation with Helen, she will understand how stupid and primitive he really is. And yet the guy overcame he invited Helen to slow dance when the appropriate song began to play. Well, finally, she smiled at him. "I thought you'd never make up your mind." All these words confused Max. It turns out that Helen had been watching him all that evening and understood both his interest and indecision. That's how it goes. But most importantly, she was waiting for the guy to finally give her attention. I wanted this. This means only one thing. Did she like Max too? Yes, I liked it. And how? After that memorable evening, Helen and Max began dating. The girl said more than once that she felt happy and protected next to him, and so it was. Max was ready to move for the sake of his beloved mountain. The guy had already graduated from college and was working at a factory. A significant part of the salary was now spent on gifts for his beloved. Max chose things for the girl with great pleasure and tried to guess whether Helen would like this teddy bear or whether a bright silk scarf would suit her. This feeling was new to Max. He didn't know before that another person's joy could make you so happy. Helen was so cutely embarrassed when she received another gift. She was embarrassed that she herself could not answer her beloved in the same way. The girl did not work yet. She graduated from the Pedagogical University, Faculty of Languages. And this also warmed Max's soul. Other girls, on the contrary, try to trick guys into giving them gifts. Max also had these. And Helen felt embarrassed that they were spending money on her. When Helen graduated from university, Max proposed to her. The girl didn't think for a long time and immediately agreed, which made the guy happy. The future spouses immediately faced many everyday issues, and the most important of them concerned living space. Helen lived with her parents, Max with his mother. Both wanted to start their family history in a separate area, so it was decided to rent an apartment. The young couple got married and rented an apartment in the city center. From this house, it was convenient for both to get to works. Max to the factory, and Helen to her later. The household grindings with which parents on both sides frightened young people did not exist as such. Helen immediately took over the cleaning and cooking. Max was used only for particularly difficult tasks. Hanging curtains, fixing a faucet, screwing a door to a closet, nailing a shelf. There were no scandals or quarrels about this between the young spouses. By the way, sometimes Max voluntarily stood at the stove and spoiled his beloved with delicious meat or vegetable salad. He knew how to cook since childhood. His mother raised him to be fully capable and a citizen, and not a helpless wimp like his father. In a word, everything in the young family was wonderful. Max couldn't be happier with his happiness. They ended up with capricious, demanding wives. The guys sometimes complained about their spouses when they got together with someone after work, and Max had nothing to say about his Helen at such moments. Only then, years later, did Max begin to think about what was happening in his life, or maybe it was bad that Helen didn't express her complaints and wishes to him. Maybe even then her dissatisfaction with her husband began to accumulate. It would be better if she spoke directly about everything right away, rather than being so silent. She was silent, and then it burst out. Most likely, the modest, quiet wife was afraid of offending Max. Of course, something didn't suit her even then, but she remained silent out of delicacy and self-doubt. Yes, Helen had her own childhood traumas, hence her humility and desire to please everyone, and her inability to defend her interests. In appearance, Max's wife's family seemed prosperous. In fact, Helen's father drank a lot. After getting drunk, he insulted his wife and daughter, showered them with threats, and threw things. This man pretty much spoiled the psyche of his own daughter, but of course did not admit it, believing that he did everything for the family. He brought in a good salary. It was like that. My father-in-law worked in the mines and earned a good salary. But how much work it cost Helen's mother to maintain her husband's human appearance. She made sure that he did not drink before the shift, listening to undeserved insults. Otherwise, the husband would lose his job, and the family accordingly would lose income. Times were hard. The mother could not allow this to happen, so she had to endure it. Helen was very ashamed of this state of affairs, so she did not confess everything to Max right away, but only on the eve of the wedding. The guy saw how hard this frankness cost the bride. Helen sincerely believed that, having learned the truth, Max would be able to leave her. Max, after the story, he hugged the girl tightly and promised that he would protect her from all troubles, and she would no longer have to suffer. This would not happen in their family. Everyone will be happy in it. Both her beloved modesty and lack of pretensions, all this, most likely, was a consequence of Helen's psychological trauma. Maybe for some, such parental behavior would have passed without a trace, but Helen was sensitive and anxious by nature. That's why she became so quiet, submissive, unsure of her own strengths and desires. Max, after hearing his beloved's story, thought for the first time that the absence of a father in a child's life could be even better than his presence. So he may have even been lucky that the negligent father wandered off into the sunset and didn't bother his ex-wife and son. Like about a year after the wedding, Helen told Max that she was expecting a child. The future father's happiness knew no bounds. Of course, it's a little scary and exciting to take responsibility for the life of a real person, your own child. But it was also great because Max felt as if wings had grown behind his back. Will there really be 3 of us soon? Are we really going to have a real family now? Max still couldn't come to his senses from the good news. He either hugged Helen or walked around the room in excitement. I can't believe it either, Helen admitted. Moreover, I don't feel any changes in my body at all. It's as if there's nothing. But the doctor confirmed the term is already 2 months. So we will soon become parents. The issue of housing again became acute for the couple. Helen did not want to bring the baby into a rented apartment, and Max completely agreed with her on this. When the spouse goes on maternity leave, it will be difficult for them to get a mortgage. Extra 2 dependents still, Max's official income may not be enough to approve the deal. Therefore, you need to act now and urgently, while your wife's pregnancy is not yet noticeable. And in general, it's not enough to just buy an apartment. You also need to have time to make repairs to it before the birth of the child. And the search for housing began. Max and Helen then traveled all over the city and looked at probably 100 apartments. But, oddly enough, they didn't like any of them. Either the area was not suitable, or the condition was not satisfactory, or both spouses did not like the atmosphere in the apartment. It's just that my soul wasn't in it, that's all. And then suddenly one day, Helen came across an advertisement for the sale of a house in the suburbs. The couple did not look in that direction. Both seemed to be on Helen's mind for the apartment. But this is home. Helen's owner urgently left for another country and therefore gave away the housing for next to nothing. The couple went and inspected the house, and both were absolutely delighted. They literally fell in love with this cozy brick building surrounded by a magnificent cherry orchard. The yard is big. We could make a playground for the children. Helen was happy. How convenient it will be to walk here with the kids. Just imagine. Well, in the spring, when the cherries bloom in this garden, it's probably just magical. There's also a garage here. Max was happy. I'm still thinking about getting a car in the future. The rooms are spacious and there is a balcony. You can also put a gazebo in the center of the garden and it will be absolutely beautiful. In general, the couple unanimously decided that they would live only in this wonderful house. The mortgage was issued quickly. Everything went without problems. Yes, Max now had to transfer most of his salary to the bank every month, and this was expected to happen for many years. But it was worth it. Valen and Max enthusiastically set about arranging their nest. They repasted the wallpaper in the rooms, partially updated the furniture, painted something, repaired something. These were very pleasant chores. Max protected his pregnant wife from work as best he could. He did a great job with the repairs himself. Sometimes, however, he called friends for help, but Helen really wanted to do something herself in a cozy, beloved home, and she worked to the best of her ability. By the time the first child was born, everything was ready. My son's nursery resembled a picture from a fashion magazine. light blue wallpaper with cars, a white crib. There were also stylish shelves and a spacious, reliable closet, comfortable diapers, and of course, young parents did not have significant financial resources at that time, and everything was bought on occasion or at discounts and promotions. However, the couple were able to do it. They managed it. Stephen was born at full term. He was a wonderful and problem-free child. Of course, there were sleepless nights, but Helen coped with everything, took care of her son, and managed to do housework. I was tired, of course, and therefore, from time to time, Max arranged fasting days for the young mother and ordered food from the restaurant. True, it was often impossible to do this. The mortgage took a lot of money, and now he worked alone. There wasn't much money, but nothing. They didn't live in poverty. Max was now trying to take on more work. He had to feed his family. The man felt that he had a huge responsibility. It is he who must ensure the well-being of his wife and child, but Max was still happy. Then he had a clear understanding that everything in his life was going exactly as it should. Helen, however, now periodically grumbled, which was almost never observed before, whether she doesn't have enough attention or the careless father doesn't do much with his son. But that's just the little things. The wife is simply tired, and she probably understands that Max simply cannot entertain his entire small family after a hard shift. Dany, the head of the family, definitely needs to rest. Otherwise, which of him is a worker in the morning? Helen understands all this. She cannot help but understand. Grumpy. So she is a weak woman, she is allowed to. Max was lenient about this. Stephen grew up quickly. Just yesterday he was a baby, and now he is an inquisitive and active boy, asking 1,000 questions per second. Max loved playing with his son every evening. No matter how tired the man was, he devoted at least half an hour to the child. They played tag, put together puzzles, construction sets, and just went wild on the floor in the nursery. It's a shame Max didn't get to spend more time with his son. Work and fatigue took their toll, and yet the man considered himself an ideal parent. He and Helen were unlucky with their fathers, but Stephen has a completely different future ahead of him. And now Stephen is almost 3 years old. He started going to kindergarten. Helen got ready for work. She was a little worried about how it would be to combine work and a child, but she was also happy. Max saw that his wife was already bored at home. She always liked school, students, lessons. Max was happy for his wife. She bought herself new things for work. I walked around so happy, in anticipation of change, and Max was happy. Still, now financial responsibility will not only be on his shoulders. Of course, he earns a lot more. And yet, knowing that the other half also takes on part of the total budget is somehow calmer. And then it suddenly became clear that Helen was pregnant again. This news did not cause such joy as the news of the first pregnancy. Helen cried and blamed Max for everything. He did not respond to unfair reproaches. He understood that it was so difficult for his wife. Well, maybe you should go to the hospital, Max suggested awkwardly. We are not ready for a second child. You're not ready in the first place. My son has just grown up. You could at least rest a little, but here comes the baby again. Yes, your body probably hasn't recovered from the first birth. He can't bear such a burden now. Max felt sorry for the baby that was now developing under his wife's heart. He's no worse than Stephen, their adorable, smart son. But Max loved his wife much more than this still unknown child. Helen's health and happiness were dearer to it. Helen at first seemed to be in the mood for an interruption. I even went to the antenatal clinic and got a referral, but she couldn't take this step. Max supported his wife. It's okay, we can handle it. He hugged Helen, who was sobbing from the abundance of emotions and feelings. Let's break through. Everything will be fine with us. You are so good to me. Helen pressed herself closer to her husband, as if seeking protection. What a blessing that I have you. Lily was born a little premature. For some reason, the second pregnancy turned out to be more difficult. Helen had to go to save every now and then. Max at this time was left alone with his son, who was already going to kindergarten. It was the garden that turned out to be a salvation, because he couldn't quit his job to look after the child. After all, someone has to support the family. It turned out to be difficult. In the morning, it was necessary to wake up the baby, dress him, and take him to the garden, then rush to work, plow there, until the evening dawn. Then I run to the garden again, doing some shopping along the way, and at home cooking, cleaning, washing. Stephen also demanded to play with him, But Max was ready to endure these temporary difficulties for the sake of the happiness of his family. The baby was born a little earlier than planned, only a month and a half away from normal, and the baby's appearance was strikingly different from what Max had imagined, already being the father of one child. A tiny, wrinkled, bright red face, arms, legs like twigs, almost transparent skin stretched out over protruding tiny ribs. The baby didn't look much like the strong, pink-cheeked Stephen. He immediately resembled a baby from an advertisement, and the girl's appearance evoked both aching tenderness and anxiety. Max's heart sank with pity as he looked at this fragile child lying in a ditch. Doctors did not give any prognosis. Mary turned out to be smart. She did it. True, while the girl was fighting for her life, her parents spent all this time in great anxiety. Fortunately, a couple of months after birth, their daughter was discharged from the hospital as a relatively healthy child. The baby immediately became everyone's favorite. Her grandparents' parents, older brother, and relatives doted on this little one. Either caused something about her from the very beginning. Either charisma or charm, clearly something innate. Looking at his daughter smiling at the world from the stroller, Max was glad that he and Helen had made the right decision. If the couple had chickened out then, if Helen had finally gotten rid of the unplanned baby, this miracle with huge, curious eyes simply would not have happened. Scary to imagine. When Helen and her daughter returned home, Max breathed a sigh of relief. Now again, all household chores and problems were on the shoulders of the wife. Helen did well. The house was always clean and smelled of delicious food, and the children looked well-groomed and happy. Max was happy to return to his cozy nest after a hard day at work. True, the wife again began to grumble quietly. She wanted Max to take on more household responsibilities. Why, if she did a great job herself? Max, however, fully provided for the family financially. To each his own. The husband is the breadwinner, the wife is the keeper of the hearth. Helen made an ideal hearth keeper. Max constantly told her about this. Knowing for some reason such compliments did not particularly please my wife. Strange. Max was not a completely inattentive and insensitive spouse. Sometimes he arranged for Helen to have relaxing evenings and let her go out with her friends, and at this time he himself remained with the children and periodically got rid of his wife's cooking. He ordered delivery from a restaurant and took his family to resorts every year, so the man's conscience was clear. Things were looking up for Max at work. The young, intelligent specialist was noticed and began to be promoted. Soon the man was appointed head of the workshop, which had a very good effect on his salary. At that time, Mary had just turned 3 years old. My daughter started going to kindergarten. Helen thought about going to work again. True, now with 2 children in her arms, she was even more worried. How will I manage everything? Helen lamented. Children need so much attention. They have clubs and sections. Who will drive them now? And in general, devote time all day to other people's children and see your own only in the evening. But you don't have to go to work yet, Mike noted reasonably. He had been considering this option for a long time but had not discussed it with his wife. Max was silent only because he was sure that Helen could not live without her school. And here it is. The wife, it turns out, doesn't want to leave maternity leave herself like this. What's it like not going to work? Helen didn't understand. Yes, very simple. I earn enough. It's enough for us. So don't rush. Stay calm at home and take care of the children. Moreover, Stephen will soon go to 1st grade. It needs to be prepared. And then lessons. Helen thought about this proposal for about 2 days, weighed the pros and cons, hesitated, and then made her final decision. Yes, you're right, she said at dinner, looking into her husband's eyes. Probably in our situation, it's really better for me to take care of the children. That's great. Max was happy. He suddenly felt like a mountain had been lifted from his shoulders. Nothing will change. Your home will be just as warm and cozy. And now he can handle the financial side of the issue quite well alone. In the years that his wife was on maternity leave, Max made good progress in his career. Everything worked out in the best way for the family. Time flew by at great speed. Max worked. The children grew up. Helen took care of the house and heirs, periodically sighing about her ruined career. No, she tried to go to work several times, but very quickly realized that the salary was not worth the effort. At home, everything suddenly deteriorated. The children were slipping in their studies. Permanent bedlam settled in the rooms. The family ate pasta, sausages, and other obviously unhealthy food made in haste, and then Mary was constantly sick. First one thing, then another. These were the consequences of prematurity. Nothing seemed so serious and critical. But nevertheless, Helen had to travel with her daughter to doctors. So, experiments with work for Helen ended almost as soon as they began. It's okay. The children will grow up. We'll catch up, Max reassured. It's good for you to talk, Helen sighed. What a great guy you are. Already a big boss. I'm proud of you, I really am. But it's also a shame for myself. Years of study, it turns out, were in vain. Housekeeping is all she... At such moments, Max hugged Helen, hugged her tightly, and reassured her. He really appreciated what his wife did for the family. A clean house, delicious hot lunches and dinners, successful children thanks to constant attention. It's just a dream, a fairy tale. There is no need to wish for more. But Helen's complaints about the lack of implementation of communication with colleagues and personal growth, Max did not take them seriously. And what is Helen worried about? Would she really change places with her peers who carried children and worked from morning to evening and carried on everyday life? And of course, looked the part. The spouse does not understand his happiness. Well, it's okay, it's not scary. The main thing is that Helen is the right wife. Her husband and children are her priority. It's so cozy, warm, and easy to live in the world. Max believed that he had many years of a happy family life ahead of him, and then a calm, prosperous old age close to his beloved wife and surrounded by children and grandchildren. But fate decreed otherwise. Open a women's club or something like that. It seems like a place where local ladies gather to read books, hold discussions on certain issues, chat about pressing topics like staying fit, raising children, and recipes, and so on. I thought that in our city there are many women who, like me, are literally locked within four walls. Helen explained to her husband with inspiration. Surely I will have clients. Moreover, we don't have anything like this in our city yet. The niche is not occupied. Well, I do not know. Max shook his head. He didn't think that his wife would have many potential clients in their small town. Still a deep province. The average salary in the city is low. This is how he managed to get to the right place at the right time. Hence the prosperity. Not everyone is so lucky. They don't have a capital. After all, for there to be so many unemployed, bored ladies here. You will give me money to develop my business, right? Helen's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. Max sighed and explained to his wife why her idea was doomed to failure. With every word he said, the woman's eyes became sadder. The corners of her mouth drooped down. Max understood that he was telling his beloved the hard truth. He was sorry to disappoint Helen, but she should know what she was getting into. And in the end, Max simply doesn't want to throw money away. It's not so easy for him to get them anymore. No, if Helen wanted expensive jewelry, a new fur coat, or a trip to the resort, you are always welcome. But spending a decent amount of money on a castle in the air, which will undoubtedly burst immediately, well, no. Probably, having received a refusal from her husband, Helen finally decided something for herself. Max understood everything later, only later, when he calmed down a little and was able to analyze the situation. Then he should have helped his wife, given her money, supported her, and he behaved, to put it mildly, ugly. To hell with them, with money, let them disappear, but the warm, trusting relationship between the spouses would remain. And anyway, who knows, maybe Helen's idea would have worked. By the way, only later Max realized that this was exactly what he was afraid of. Helen will become wealthy, successful, financially independent. And what does she need it for then? The man liked to feel like the breadwinner and protector of the family. But Max also realized this too late. And when I realized it, I was horrified. Was he really that selfish? It's strange how Helen didn't divorce him sooner. Some more time passed. It seems that outwardly nothing has changed, but still Helen has become different. Max didn't notice it right away, but then he realized it. Of course, the previously cheerful, attentive wife became somehow alien, cold, distant. If earlier, when she met her husband from work, she joyfully shared with him the news of the day and bombarded him with questions, now she was more and more silent, thinking about something of her own. You can't get too many words out of her. But I stopped grumbling about it, and without it. No, this did not affect the quality of cleaning and cooking. Lunches and dinners were still excellent, and the house was sparkling clean, but he was worried about Helen's condition. He tried as best he could to please her, bought gifts for no reason, took the children for a walk to give his wife a rest. All these attempts did not change the situation in any way. Max drove himself into anxious thoughts. Eventually, we'll stop. Why should she complain about life? Why should she suddenly be sad? Her husband fully provides for the whole family, and at a quite decent level. Helen herself has the opportunity not to work, but to take care of the house and children. Yes, all her friends are jealous of her. Everyone would like to be in her place. Max calmed himself down and plunged headlong into his work. The boss just got involved in a new project, so Max sometimes had to spend the night in the office. There was good money at stake. Max still believed that he had a reliable back at home. The wife is caring, sensitive, kind, faithful. So it was, is, and will be. How wrong the man. We need to talk, Helen greeted her husband with these words from work that evening. Max sat in the office with a report. It took a long time to tinker with it, but I managed to do everything. The children were already asleep in their rooms. It seems that Stephen had a chess tournament today, and Max, being too busy, didn't even call to find out how his son was. This is probably what Helen wants to talk about. She, of course, wants more attention, but what can she do? Max adores his family, but someone has to earn a comfortable life because he is trying for them. The man prepared to make excuses for forgetting about an important event for... Of course, he will ask for forgiveness, and tomorrow he will buy his son some kind of reward. We'll definitely buy it. But the topic of the evening conversation turned out to be completely unexpected. We need to get a divorce. Helen looked her husband straight in the eyes with a serious, cold gaze. The face is calm and confident. The woman had clearly thought it through, weighed everything, and no longer doubted that she was doing the right thing. Max blinked his eyes in confusion. Unlike his wife, he was not ready for such a conversation. It was as if he had been hit on the head with a bag of sand. Even my eyes grew dark. It's obvious that we're not on the same path, Helen sighed. Every year I become more and more convinced of this. I tried to tell you, I tried to fix everything. Remember how many times I told you, but you don't understand me at all and seem to see me only as a service staff. I can't do that. I feel like I'm losing myself and I don't like it at all. It scares me. It's not true, Max objected. I love you. I love you sincerely and with all my heart. You are my closest person. It only seems to you, Helen sighed again. You love the image that you yourself created. A cozy housewife, a comfortable life partner, a good mother. What about my interests? My career, self-realization. That's the problem. It's not a problem. I'll give you money for your business. How much do you need? Reminding? It's already late. Helen shook her head. I don't need anything from you. I have already found money, even sponsors who believed in me and my project and are willing to risk their capital. So even better. It's nice to know that I am moving towards my goals on my own, achieving everything myself. But with you, I feel bad and stuffy. It's like you're dragging me down. We need to get a divorce before it's too late. We are still young. You still have time to arrange your personal life. It will be better this way. I don't want to live without you. I can't. Max kept trying to find the right words. How to convey to Helen how dear she is to him. How to convince her that everything will be fine with them. He will improve, for sure. Max, I know you well. Maybe even better than yourself. Helen smiled for the first time since the beginning of the conversation. That's why I know I'm sure that you can and will even be happy. Sure. And the children, how are they without a father? Children. Helen grinned. You might think you spend a lot of time with them now. Don't worry about your children. No one is going to deprive you of them. And I couldn't have done it even if I wanted to. You will also see each other, communicate, and walk together. If you want, of course not. No one will. Max spent a long time convincing Helen to come to her senses, swore his love, and promised to improve. Bargained even, it seems, threatened. But Helen stood her ground. She firmly decided for herself that she could not live with Max because he supposedly limits her, does not see her as a talented and successful person, and this cuts off her wings and takes away her energy. As a result, Max slammed the door and left his dear and cozy home. Once upon a time, this place was for him a quiet, warm haven where he could hide from life's hardships and work troubles. But now here he was hurt, trampled, humiliated. Max got behind the wheel, pressed the gas pedal all the way, and rushed through the deserted dark streets. Where should he go? The man didn't know this, but he definitely didn't want to return home. As a result, Max ended up on the bank of a river flowing outside the city. I sat right on the grass, wet from the evening dew, and looked at the large stars. Tears were streaming down my cheeks. It's good that no one saw him at that moment. Pathetic, confused, humiliated, disgusted with myself. Feelings changed at a dizzying speed. Resentment. He did so much for the family. He disappeared at work for days, just so that his children and wife did not need anything. Yes, and Helen, to the best of his ability, tried to help around the house and with the baby, but they trampled him like that, put him out the door, like someone unnecessary, useless, disgustingly unpleasant. Anger. How dare she? What does she think she is? I sat at home all this time, rested, and wandered around the resorts. And then it suddenly turns out that Max limited her in everything and did not allow her to develop. Fear. Will he really be left alone now? Max is used to the fact that everything in his life goes according to plan. Career, strong family, ideal situation. He liked to return to his cozy nest. He liked to see how wonderful his children were growing up and what. Now it's all over. Max moved into a rented apartment. I couldn't stay at home. It was too painful and too hard. Helen called him. They needed to settle a lot of domestic and legal issues. Max spoke to his wife reluctantly. These conversations caused him almost physical pain. With secret gloating, the man detected notes of guilt in his wife's voice. Of course, she sees how hard it is for him and understands perfectly why her husband is now in such a state. She's probably suffering. She's still conscientious. That's what she needs. Max hoped that Helen would change her mind. Sometimes he tried to convince his wife that there was no need to rush, but the woman gently stuck to her line. She was serious about getting a divorce and a completely new law. The divorce took place by court decision. All jointly acquired property was divided between the spouses. Car, house, funds, and bank accounts. According to Max, this is not a particularly fair decision, given that he earned the money for all this. Helen hardly worked during her marriage, but you can't argue with the law. Max was still in a lot of pain. He lived in a rented apartment and tried to forget himself at work. The man deliberately took on difficult tasks so as not to be left alone with sad thoughts. Max kept the car, which actually belonged to both him and Helen. But Helen and the children lived in their common house. As long as it stays that way, this was a mutual agreement between the now former spouse. Max had no idea how long the period of limbo would last. Several months passed before he regained the ability to think calmly and reason adequately. Then a more or less acceptable image of the future took shape. Max will pull himself together, work hard, pay child support, and buy an apartment with more. Well, his income is good. He can handle it. It will be necessary to determine the order of meetings with the son and daughter. Max didn't want to lose touch with them. He dreaded the prospect of becoming a father like his own. The man planned to actively participate in the lives of his son and daughter. As for Helen, she is now actively developing her business. She seems to be doing well, so Max shouldn't have doubted her. Helen is very busy and needs support. Max will show it to his soulmate. Perhaps then Helen will understand what a good, reliable, noble person her now ex-husband is and will return to him, and everything will be as before. Max's hopes were not destined to come true. He recovered a little from the shock when another surprise hit him. That evening, Max decided to walk to the shopping center to buy himself something for dinner. I deliberately chose the long road through the park to warm up a little. It was a wonderful warm evening. There were a lot of people in the park. Couples in love, parents with children, crowds of walking teenagers. He didn't notice Helen right away. At first, Max almost walked past his wife. The eye accidentally caught on the light yellow dress that suited Helen so well, especially at the end of summer when she was already tanned. Helen walked hugging a young man. He looked at her with loving eyes and carefully caught her every word. Helen looked happy and very beautiful. It was clear that she liked being around this man. So she met someone, hence the divorce and division of property. And these conversations are about misunderstandings. Max suppressed the urge to approach the happy couple and start a scandal. He turned around and hurried home. In the apartment, Max gave vent to his emotions, slammed a plate on the floor, and smashed his knuckles against the concrete wall. All these measures helped little. Helen seems so right, so reliable, and suddenly it turns out that she has a lover. So maybe this is some kind of far-fetched misunderstanding that is to blame for the divorce. That same evening, Max called his wife and demanded an explanation. "Did you see me with Andy?" Helen was not at all embarrassed. "Yes, we are together now, but I didn't deceive you while we were married. There was no relationship between me and him." Max still couldn't help himself. He unleashed a torrent of vicious insults on his ex-wife. He wanted her to be in his place, to feel his pain. But Helen just hung up. Nothing. Max shouted into the emptiness of the rented apartment, "I will take revenge on you again, so that it won't seem enough." At first, the man wanted to punish this Andy, beat him up, or do something more sophisticated. I found out more about him. It turned out that Andy worked as an ordinary psychologist at a local energy company. No power, no money. Yes, average. And how could he hook Helen? Why does she need this loser? Maybe Andy even set his sights on Helen because of her house. And what? There are a lot of square meters. The location is good. Helen, if you judge it that way, is an inviolable bride despite having 2 children. House. How long did it take them to choose it, and with what pleasure did they arrange it? Will it really now have a new owner, this same Andy? But this is Max. It was Max who earned this house with his hump, who invested so much money, labor, and soul into. You want to see a quiet life? Max grinned. A plan for revenge has already matured in his head. At that moment, the man did not even think about the consequences. The main thing is to take revenge on his wife, to disrupt her plans for a happy, carefree life with her new gentleman. Max immediately began looking for a buyer for his part of the house. He decided to leave the city, leave his high-paying job, his friends, his career, and move to Washington to start all over again. It's just that in a small town, everything reminded us of a happy past. It was unbearable, too painful, too hard. Max was going to sell his part of the house, but not to the first candidate he came across. A drunk and senile grandmother or large family of migrants. A cheerful company was needed for the unfaithful wife so that life would not seem like honey to her. Max was not interested in money. He would earn it later. The main thing is to annoy your ex-wife. Let her understand that without him she is nothing. Let her see how insignificant her lover is. Many years later, Max could not understand himself then, why he did not think about his own children. They were not to blame for anything. Why do they need it? Max was too blinded by hatred and jealousy to think about such things. His nature yearned for revenge, and he behaved very rudely towards Helen. The ex-wife was right, she divorced him, and accordingly, she had every right to her personal life. Max's anger and rage were unjustified. People responded to advertisements for sale. Max received dozens of calls every day. Of course, this offer was more than profitable. Half of a large house in a good area of the city. Almost the price of a dorm room. Everyone was somehow too prosperous. They won't make life particularly difficult. We need someone more interesting, more colorful. And then one day, a young guy contacted Max. It was a poor student from some village. He came to the city and rented an apartment from an old woman. The guy decided that it would be cheaper for him to take out a loan and pay a much smaller amount to the bank every month than he gave to the elderly tenant. And here, consider it, he will pay for his own. Max thought about it. Student. That's good. Very good. The young man will probably take friends and have noisy parties. Helen will definitely not seem a little. It was Sunday the very next day. Max met with a potential buyer in a cafe to discuss all the details, and then go together to inspect the house. The student turned out to be a very young guy. Thin with thick glasses, pimply, and somewhat homely. The entire ridiculous appearance of the potential buyer had nothing to do with his confident voice and the firm look of his gray eyes. Max wondered if this mattress could give his wife a fun life. Somewhat quiet. It is immediately clear that he is unpopular. It's hard to imagine this student as the organizer of a noisy party. Anyway, all the same, Helen is in for a very unpleasant surprise. A stranger in the house. Few people would like this. When Max. It's time for Max to hurry up. He left the factory and has already found a place for himself in Washington. They are expecting him in a week, so we need to finish all our work and fly off to a new life. Helen, of course, was very surprised. She also glanced with hostility at the student, who was looking around the rooms with an imperturbable expression. But the ex-wife was silent. What could she say? It was Max's full right to sell his half of the house. It suits me. The boy finally smiled. No, so that's great. Tomorrow then we will settle all legal issues. Let's finalize the deal. Well, move in and live. What are you doing? Helen shouted into the phone. She dialed Max immediately after the door closed behind the visitors. I didn't start a scandal in front of the student. There was desperation in her voice. Do you even know something about him? About the person whom he placed with his own children? I don't know anything at all. Max answered his ex-wife calmly. But you will soon get to know him very well. I hope you have a normal relationship, but I'm confident in you. You always seem to find a common language with young people. Maybe you'll thank me again. Oh, you. Helen burst into an angry tirade. Max didn't listen to the end, just hung up. My soul felt a little lighter. Now Helen is truly upset, and that's putting it mildly. It's okay, he'll survive. Let her negotiate with the student and look for money to buy out his share. And this guy seems to be no slouch. He won't give up what he has so easily. He will try to profit from this situation, or attempts to see right through the young buyer. A poor guy from the village dreaming of getting hooked in the city. And then suddenly, such luck. No, he won't waste his chance. He won't let him down. Max was sure of this. Let it finally dawn on her that without her ex-husband, she is nothing. And this Andy will not help her in any way. He's not a man at all. Maybe the lover will even go into the fog when he realizes that there are problems. Soon Max flew to Washington. At the new job, I had to learn everything again, delve into many nuances. And then there were pressing issues, finding housing, arranging life. And it was great because the man had no time or energy left for sad thoughts about what. The salary was good, such that Max had previously never dreamed of even in his leadership position. But most of the earnings were given out in an envelope unofficially. All the better. You will receive less alimony. Oddly enough, Max again didn't think about children. It was as if some kind of Helen was standing before my eyes. This is what resentment means. Years passed. Max again achieved career heights, now much greater than before. And how could it be otherwise if he devoted himself entirely to work? What else could he do to distract himself? Of course, such diligence yielded results. The man tried not to remember about his ex-wife. At first, it was very painful, then it was embarrassing. Finally, time also played a role. When you don't see people for a long time, don't communicate with them, they become like strangers. Max regularly paid child support to his daughter and son, but he did not maintain communication with his children and wife. Sometimes, out of curiosity, I looked through Helen's social networks. He saw photographs of his happy ex-wife and the once hated Andy, who never ran away anywhere. Children growing up and felt less and less feelings for these people and the situation itself. I knew that Helen and the children were alive and well. This was quite enough. At first, the ex-wife tried to initiate communication between the children and has she forgiven Max? He did not know. But Helen really wanted, for the connection between father and children to remain intact. You, like no one else, should understand how important it is for children to have a father in their lives, Helen convinced her ex-husband over the phone. You told me many times how hard it was for you without your dad. Max categorically did not want any communication at all. Ideally, he dreamed of starting a new life. It was as if nothing had happened. He never asked Helen any questions. What was it like to live in a family with a neighbor who unexpectedly fell on their head? How did they get out of the situation, and did they get out? All this no longer concerned Max. He had his own plans, his own concerns. Several more years passed. Max met the beautiful Veronica at a corporate party. A slender, tall, relaxed, and very determined young lady. Somehow, everything started spinning quickly for them. In general, 3 months after they met, Veronica announced she was pregnant, and Max proposed to her. So what? The man was already tired of his bachelor life. He wanted home comfort and warmth. There were financial resources for the family. So why wait? Veronica turned out to be a very obedient wife. Perhaps the age difference played a role. The new wife was much younger than Max. She asked her husband's opinion on any matter, constantly complimented him, looked after him, and never grumbled. Everything suited her. This was very flattering for Max. Soon 2 wonderful twin girls appeared in the family. Max became a father again, this time more attentive and caring than before. The man took into account past mistakes. He now knew that children vitally needed the presence of both mom and dad nearby, and did not spare time and warmth for his little daughters. You are the perfect father, the perfect husband, Veronica often exclaimed. How lucky I was that we met by chance. Then, Max smiled back. He was happy too. Years ago, leaving in upset feelings into the unknown, the man could not imagine that someday all this would happen in his life. Beautiful, loving wife, children, career. This time, Max was more attentive to his wife. He was sensitive to the changes in her mood. Veronica herself decided not to work. Just like Helen. Once upon a time, a young wife devoted herself to family, but the difference was still present. She clearly did not feel disadvantaged in any way. She was sincerely happy about Max's gifts, enjoyed cleaning and cooking, and tinkered with the children a lot. At the same time, she didn't forget about herself. Several times a week, she left the little ones in the care of a nanny, while she and her friends went to a fitness club or bar. Max did not think about his ex-wife and older children for a long time. It was easier for him that way. Stephen and Mary have already become adults. Neither daughter nor son expressed a desire to find their father and talk to him. Max was rather happy about this because he didn't know what to talk about with his grown-up children. And then suddenly the man found himself thinking about them often. How did they live all these years? Are his children happy? Maybe they need help. Max decided that he should take the first step. Yes, it will be difficult. Surely both Helen and the children hate him, and deservedly so. Helen honestly tried for a long time to establish communication between her son, daughter, and her father, and she did the right thing. She is right. It is really important for children to have a father in their life. Just how long can you bang your head against a concrete wall? So Helen gave up. She failed to reach her ex-husband through his anger and resentment. Veronica saw that something was wrong with her husband. She was always sensitive and attentive. Are you worried about the children? One day she decided to talk. You can't hide anything from you. Max smiled sadly. Yes, it's not difficult to guess at all. The woman shrugged. You even pronounce their names in your sleep sometimes. I see how hard it is for you. It's hard. What will you do now? I have so much to do with my time that I can't straighten it out. Yes, you stumbled. But you can also understand. You were in shock and felt betrayed. You were not capable of adequate thoughts and actions. It's like a state of passion. You've got so much going on, but, it's never too late to fix everything. As long as everyone is alive, it's never too late. No, do you think so? Max looked at his wife with interest. Just go there. Veronica put her hand on the man's shoulder. Go and talk to them. Whatever happens, you will feel better. You see, it's hard for me to see you so sad. Thank you, Max hugged Veronica with gratitude. No matter how bad a person he was, fate was always favorable to him. And Max's work worked out well, and the people around him turned out to be wonderful. When a conversation with his wife inspired Max and gave him strength and determination. Yes, Max will go to his hometown and meet with his ex-wife and older children, and so Max again found himself in the city of his childhood and youth. It turns out that he had already forgotten how dusty, narrow the streets are here, and how unusually few people there are on the streets. It's quiet around, not at all like in Washington. The man decided to walk home. I walked from the hotel itself through almost half the city, but still did not feel tired. On the contrary, the movement seemed to give strength. Max is already close. All he has to do is turn the corner, and he will see the house that was once so dear to his heart. The man was overcome with excitement. The house has changed a lot. Previously, it was an ordinary brick building. Now it is a stylish structure with geometric patterns, large windows, and a superstructure. The cherry orchard has turned into a mini park with a tiled fountain, paths, and statues. The most amazing thing is that the central part of the territory was now occupied by a swimming pool. How is this even possible? The site and the building itself were transformed beyond recognition. If it weren't for the address sign, Max wouldn't have believed his eyes. The house resembled the creation of a modern designer, and a very expensive one at that. By the way, Max saw similar projects in fashion magazines that he sometimes came across. A man, as if struck by thunder, looked at his once home and did not understand anything. How the house has changed so much. Who lives here now? Clearly not Helen anymore. She would hardly have had enough money for such an architect and for all these additions and improvements. This is a fortune. Max knew that his wife's business was thriving, and yet it was not such a profitable project that she could afford it. Most likely, Helen moved somewhere. Some local oligarch now lives here. But there's only one way to know for sure. Max decisively stepped towards the gate and pressed the bell button. A few moments later, a tanned, slender woman in house shorts and a long men's t-shirt slipped out of the house. Her hair is pulled back into a high ponytail, sneakers on feet. Max immediately recognized the owner of the house, Helen, and was happy and confused at the same time. He was already in the mood for a conversation with strangers who bought a house from his ex-wife. Seeing Max, Helen raised his eyebrows in surprise. She looked simply super fit, slim, well-groomed. I nodded. Max let Shelley in. The man was ready for a more than cool meeting. Still, many years ago, he acted rudely to his family. First, he sold half of the house to a poor student and then disappeared completely. He paid child support but never congratulated his son or daughter on his birthday. Didn't meet the children, essentially abandoned them. Yes, he was motivated by resentment, but this is no excuse for an adult. Max behaved like the ultimate scoundrel and traitor. It's a pity that the realization came so late. It seemed to him that Helen should hate him, but she smiled, and so warmly they walked through the garden, which had changed beyond recognition. Max, looking around and around, was more and more surprised. Helen, seeing this, smiled mysteriously. The designer also clearly worked on the interior decoration of the house. Everything around said that the family living here was clearly not experiencing financial difficulties. "Wow," Max said, looking around the hall. "Does your business bring in that kind of money?" "Business is booming." "You're right," Helen smiled. "And yet, we could not afford such a house. This is a different story. By the way, I tried to call you many times to thank you, but you didn't pick up." He was a fool. Max lowered his head. "If you only knew how much I repent of this. I missed everything I could in the lives of my own children. They probably hate me now, and rightly so." "You're wrong." Helen's eyes became serious and sad. "Yes, you really missed a lot. But I found words to explain your behavior to the children. Don't worry. They grew up to be understanding and sensitive people. We're still waiting to meet you and waiting for you to be ready. As for your feelings of guilt, then consider that you have already received punishment. You have punished yourself. Stephen and Mary have brought me so much joy over the years, and you were deprived of this." Max sighed heavily. "Tell me about them, please." Helen happily began talking about the children. This gives every mother special pleasure. It turns out that Stephen is a talented chess player, goes to tournaments all over the world, wins prizes, and is studying to become an economist. He himself decided not to leave home for now. Mary became interested in robotics from an early age. A childhood hobby determined the choice of profession. Now the girl is studying at the university, where she entered on her own without bribes or tutoring. In fact, she was enrolled in the course while she was still in 10th grade. The girl then won some kind of rating competition. There are even several articles about it on the internet. Max was glad that his children turned out to be so successful, smart, and kind. Helen took a plump photo album from the shelf and began showing her ex-husband photographs of Stephen and Irina. The man seemed to be getting to know his own children again. They were already so old and very beautiful. How could he be such a fool that he missed important milestones in life? "Tell me about yourself," Max asked. "How did you raise 2 children on your own and even achieve such success?" "And I wasn't alone." Helen shook her head. "Andy was always nearby. He quit and devoted all his time to developing our common business. Well, Andrew also helped us, and we all stood together for him during a difficult period." "Andrew?" Max was surprised. "Who else is this?" "That poor and, as it turned out, incredibly talented and promising student to whom you sold your part of the house." Before Max's eyes stood a thin boy with glasses, covered in teenage acne. How could he help Helen? Noticing the confusion and surprise of her ex-husband, Helen said, "Andrew is just a gift of fate. At first, I was angry that he moved into our house. I scolded you with the last words. It was you who brought him. I was worried that the young man would start bringing groups of girls to his place, and they would wander around the house at night. What peace there is here." And then it turned out that Andrew is that rare student who is focused only on his studies. He studied at the architecture department and seemed to be seriously interested in specialized subjects. The young man led a quiet, calm life. He spent whole days sitting in his room, reading blueprints, designing something in an engineering program on an old laptop. The guy crawled out of his hiding place only to have a snack. By the way, Andrew was not shy about his family. He quickly realized that he was a kind of instrument of revenge in the hands of the famous ex-husband of the hostess, and this fact greatly puzzled Andrew. He behaved quietly and seemed to even feel a sense of guilt in front of all the Helens of the family. Although, of course, he was not to blame for anything. The guy was given a separate shelf in the refrigerator, and Andrew used it exclusively, saying what kind of food the boy had. Helen was perplexed how he had not yet died of hunger or a stomach ulcer. Bread, ketchup, cheap sausage, sometimes some yogurt or cookies. In the end, a woman took pity on the guy. Her maternal heart could not stand it, and one day she simply invited him to dinner. Helen was just frying chicken legs with potatoes and making a salad. Mind-blowing aroma spread, of course, throughout the house. Helen imagined a hungry student drooling in her room, and it made her feel uneasy. And in general, you finally need to find out more about the person with whom you live side by side. And some kind of relationship with him must be maintained. After all, they live in the same house. Andrew initially refused. Helen understood the reason perfectly. The young man was very shy, but hunger still took its toll. It turned out that the guy was raised only by his mother. She worked as a cleaner in a village store. No education, no special ambitions. How could such a rural and, in general, not distant woman have such a talented son capable of science? Perhaps it was all about the boy's father. What's his name? Who is he? Andrew did not have any information about his parent. Of course, at one time he asked his mother questions, but she always avoided answering. It was obvious that it was difficult for the woman to remember this. That's why Andrew fell behind her. Why torture your mother in vain? When the time comes, she will tell you herself. She won't keep this secret forever. The mother adored her only child. She tried to give him everything she could. For the sake of her son, the woman worked several shifts and saved money for the education of her heir. She immediately realized that she had got a real treasure. No one else in their village had such children. Andrew spent his entire childhood in the village. The boy was very different from the local kids. He was always attracted by the lines and silhouettes of buildings. He drew a lot. He wanted to come up with some special house. The best gifts for Andrew were paints, good pencils, and albums, a strange hobby for a village boy. Andrew's peers mostly played football. They kicked the ball on the field outside the outskirts from morning to evening. Andrew, on the other hand, remained indifferent to everyone's fun and generally made few friends with anyone. The local kids didn't understand him. Well, he accordingly, and it was hard for the boy, especially in adolescence, when it is so important to spend a lot of time surrounded by friends. Andrew simply didn't have them. He felt lonely, strange, unwanted. Drawing saved me from sad thoughts. Andrew, having finished with the obligatory household chores, locked himself in his room and created. He drew buildings, villages, modern cities, came up with outlandish structures, then improved them, and time flew by unnoticed while he worked. Lennips, the mother, coming home from the evening shift, often found her son falling asleep right at the table over the next drawing and smiled. She knew, she felt, Andrew had a great future ahead of him. And I told my boy about this more than once. Andrew is lucky. One day, his art teacher became interested in his workload. She saw them by chance. The sheets fell out of Andrew's folder and he feverishly began to collect. What is this? The teacher picked up one of the drawings and brought it to her slightly myopic eyes. Andrew thought that he would now be scolded for being distracted in class instead of drawing the assigned still life for 45 minutes. He became fascinated again with his fantasy cities. Sorry, the boy stammered. For what? The teacher was surprised. Of course, I saw that you draw well, but these are just some kind of masterpieces. Will you show me? Andrew nodded readily. Previously, only his mother had seen his work. The boy was a little embarrassed to show the drawings to the teacher, but she sincerely admired Andrew's creations, inserting some comments from time to time. This teacher's nephew, her sister's son, studied in the city to become an architect. The woman asked Andrew to lend her some drawings to show them to specialists. Of course, I could be wrong, but it seems to me that you have a rare gift. I want my nephew to look at your drawings and maybe show them to someone at the university. Such talent should not be wasted. This is how Andrew's gift was discovered. The student, of course, immediately recognized the talent of the village boy, as did his teachers. Now Andrew was supervised by professionals. The boy often took part in competitions and almost every time he took prizes. Andrew, then an 8th grader, had already been accepted into the prestigious Faculty of Architecture in advance. All that remained was to finish school. And so, after finishing 11th grade, the guy was accepted into the local architectural university without exams. The teacher's nephew, Pasha, who became Andrew's friend over the years, advised him to enter the capital's university, but the boy assessed his capabilities perfectly. He would not have managed financially in the capital. In the outback, he had chances for an acceptable life. Moreover, the local administration awarded him a scholarship. Small, of course, but at least something. The mother, who dreamed of a bright future for her son, saved up some money so that Andrew could rent an apartment for the first time. And then he had to look for a job, because the guy's stipend would not be enough for rent and groceries. And his mother couldn't help him much. I would like to, but I've been earning pennies all my life. The guy understood that studying and working was difficult, but where to go? And then suddenly this option with a house turned up by chance. Andrew couldn't even believe his eyes when he saw the ad, but having met Max, the boy realized the offer was quite real, although of course I immediately noticed that something was not right in this story, but there was neither time nor opportunity to speculate. So the young student became the owner of part of a large house. Andrew decided that it was fate, Helen recalled. Fate itself helps him achieve his goal. After all, if he had not found such cheap housing, he would not have been able to devote himself entirely to his studies and, accordingly, would not have achieved such high results. Who knows, maybe it really is fate. At that very first dinner together, Helen realized that Andrew was an amazingly kind and modest person. He was in a very difficult situation. He did not have enough stipend for nutritious food. His mother could not help him. The boy tried to earn extra money, but his studies suffered from this. Employers needed a person who could devote at least 4 hours to work. When to study? Helen's heart sank with pity when she saw sleepy Andrew and offered him a way out. He had to take Mary to robotics 3 times a week and Stephen to chess school. For this, I promised to feed him breakfast, lunch and dinner for free and invite him to the table with the whole family. I just didn't feel sorry for a bowl of soup for him, but Andrew would definitely not agree. Shared meals brought Andrew and Helen's family even closer together. He became very friendly with Stephen and Mary and became their older friend. Andrew enjoyed playing chess with Stephen and helping design robots. Both son and daughter were delighted with their new neighbor. Both quickly became attached to him. Andrew really liked Andy too. The men talked for a long time, discussing various topics. Tellingly, they had similar opinions on many issues. The guy tried to help his neighbors in everything. There was no need to ask him. In the end, everyone got so used to him that they began to consider him a member of the family. And then suddenly, disaster struck. Andrew was already in his 4th year of study, with just a little time left before graduation. He saw that his mother tried for him, stretched with all her might, and he really wanted to thank her to make her life happy, comfortable, bright. Take mom to the sea, where she has never been, go to an expensive restaurant, buy her beautiful clothes, and there was nothing left until this happy moment. Andrew knew that as soon as he received his diploma, he would immediately receive a good job offer. Yes, they have already done so. True, they are still unofficial. However, Andrew started earning money while still a student and even managed to transfer some money to his mother. But the main thing is that success was still ahead. Andrew's mother did not live to see this moment. Helen was obviously trying to hold back her tears. A neighbor called Andrew and told him terrible news. Andrew's dearest person died of a heart attack. It is unknown how Andrew would have survived this blow if Helen and Andy had not supported him. The guy became isolated and stopped learning to take care of himself. He hardly ate. Nothing had worried the cheerful and curious young man before. He would lie on his couch all day and just stare at the ceiling. "We were always close," said Helen. They supported him, provoked him to talk, to give him the opportunity to express his emotions. I forced Andrew to eat. Otherwise, he probably would have died of hunger. Andrew became very thin and pale. Slowly, the guy came to his senses. Of course, it took him a long time to recover from the stress and get used to a life in which his dearest and most beloved person was not there. But at least I started eating and returned to university. Helen realized that everything would be fine with him now and breathed a sigh of relief. During this period, I was really afraid that he would do something to himself. Andrew didn't look like himself. You won't believe it. Several times during the night, I walked past his room and listened. "You are a very kind and good person," said Max. Helen was confused. Time passed. Andrew became his old self again and took up his textbooks. Now he could again be seen sitting at his desk with a ruler and pencil in his hands over a divided sheet of Whitman paper. Andrew devoted a lot of time to his studies and also participated in competitions. One day, a young talented architect won a grant for his first real project of arranging an ordinary house and the surrounding area. It was a huge competition. The guy had to compete with experienced architects, and yet he won. The sponsor allocated a lot of money. Of course, Andrew took on the project with enthusiasm. It was as if wings had grown behind his back. The talented young man chose the very house in which he lived as his object. Andrew took into account the wishes of all family members. The household gathered around a round table and held a kind of meeting. Everyone took turns speaking out. Andrew was making notes in his diary. Helen dreamed of a swimming pool. Andy dreamed of a combined house and garage. The children wanted beautiful fountains and a sports ground. It was not easy to combine all these applications into one harmonious project. But Andrew didn't like primitive tasks. As a result, our house was transformed. Helen shared her memories. Now he has become the way you see him. Andrew completed it in record time and won the competition. After that, offers rained down on him from all sides. Andrew has just graduated from and there's already a high demand for his services. At first, the guy was even confused by the abundance of orders. Andy helped him figure it out. Together they built some sophisticated tables, weighed all the pros and cons, and weeded out projects that were not worth taking on. Now Andrew was often away from home. He had to work in different cities and even abroad. The whole family missed him during these periods. Andrew always returned from trips with gifts and vivid impressions. He grew up literally before our eyes. The guy turned from a poor student into a wealthy man. There was now a lot of money in his accounts. He could afford to buy a house anywhere in the country or even move somewhere in Europe. But Andrew didn't want to change anything in his life. The guy got used to a family that supported him during a difficult period. They all became like family. And then Andrew met his fate. Helen smiled. He fell in love with a girl from a neighboring town. And so our boy separated and flew out of the nest. Of course, when leaving the house, Andrew gave its inhabitants a gift. He rewrote his part to Helen. Now she has become the sole owner of the beautiful house and grounds. The guy himself bought a spacious apartment for himself and his wife. We often call each other and go to visit each other. Helen continued to tell. Now Irina is studying and Andrew is looking after her. I feel calmer this way. You gave us all a huge gift when you sold your part of a house to him. I tried to tell you this, but you... The story was interrupted by a little girl, a baby about 4 years old. She ran into the hall and, seeing a stranger, froze, batting her eyelashes in confusion. Nice girl. Just 2 braided pigtails, a nose, plump lips in a bow, rosy cheeks. She must have just woken up from a nap. Zhenya, hello. The girl stammered, remembering politeness, and then completely out of etiquette. And who are you? Max was confused. How would he introduce himself to this little girl? Don't explain to the little one that he was there. And her mother's husband. Apparently, this is our friend. Helen smiled at the girl, or never did. The little girl said thoughtfully. The news that his ex-wife had become a mother again shocked him for some reason. Helen laughed loudly. You should have seen your face, she said, pulling herself together. No, Anne is not our daughter. Andy and I were planning a child, but it didn't work out. This is Andrew's child. He and his wife were flying to a conference in France. There is no place for the girl there, and her parents have no time for her. They will have enough of their own to do. So Anne is visiting us, and we are glad. She is like a granddaughter or niece to us, a wonderful child. Max and Helen talked for several hours straight. They remembered the past and discussed the children. Helen was genuinely interested in Max's new life. Having learned that he had 2 twin daughters, she was completely delighted and urgently demanded to see their photo of the baby. Be sure to come and visit us with them. These are sisters Irina and Stephen. They need to know each other. Now we will communicate, right? All grievances and misunderstandings are behind us. Max nodded. Next to Helen, he felt calm and relaxed. It seemed that everything was not so complicated and confusing. The weight that had been placed on my shoulders all these years seemed to evaporate. Of course, there is still a lot of work ahead. You need to get to know your older children again and somehow explain your behavior to them. But the main thing is that Helen is on his side. She does not harbor any grudge against her ex-husband and sincerely wishes that peace and tranquility reign in their now such a large family. Anyone else in her place would be gloating now. I wish I had turned the children against the careless hubby. How lucky he was to have her. He played a significant role in this whole story. You should definitely thank him on occasion. Stephen will arrive soon. Helen looked at Max, who was even sweating on his back. Will he really see his son now? What to tell him? How to start a conversation? It seems that the man came here precisely to meet the children. So why now, when it is just around the corner, do you want to run away as far as possible again? I'm a little worried, the man admitted. I understand, but there is no need to worry. Helen covered her ex-husband's hand with her hand. Everything will be fine. And then the woman practically, quote, as long as we are alive, it's not too late to fix anything. The main desire
Well, are you going or not? Alex Johnson rushed the family. Why should I go there? Jennifer grumbled unhappily, trying not to let her husband to be here and explain the necessity of the trip again. They were going to the cemetery to check on Alex Johnson's first wife, who had died a few months ago. Today would have been her birthday. Alex likes to show off, Jennifer thought. It seems necessary, but who needs it? Not me anyway. I need a legal marriage with him, not a walk through cemeteries with this kid who's nobody to me. 7-year-old Dany was Alex's adopted son. With his first wife, Emily Anderson, he'd been married for 10 years, but they'd had no children. At first it bothered, then it was as if they reconciled, and then Emily insisted on adoption. Alex resisted, but she insisted. He was glad that he'd been able to take Dany as a 3-year-old instead of a newborn. Emily was thrilled at first, but then it passed. Alex Johnson didn't want a child from the beginning, only pretended to be a happy father, and then the baby was left to fend for itself. Then his wife got sick, had tests, and then she died. And immediately there was a beautiful Jennifer, who was on the catch even during Emily's life, only lurking. Now she doesn't have to hide. He even dragged her to the cemetery to show her sorrow at the grave of her beloved. What does a new lover and a baby have to do with it? Just for show. What kind of man is that? Jennifer thought with annoyance, but did not dare to interfere. Too long to achieve a fiancé. A rich businessman who loves her and spoils her. The only disadvantage, a child and these trips to the cemetery in threes. But why? Okay, it's not that often, Jennifer thought. Once in a while you can be patient. Already in the car, Alex began to explain. You have to, Jennifer. And the child needs to communicate with the deceased. You remember Mom, don't you? I remember. The boy frowned. He remembered, but not well, because his mother was sick and not before him. Now he has a father, a healthy one, but he's not much use to his son either. And then there's Aunt Jennifer, who doesn't care about him either. Daddy once said that soon she will be my mother, and she will be sick too, asked the boy, who associated the word mother with hospitals and the smell of medicine. But for some reason his father got angry, thinking that Dany was talking about his real mom. The boy obediently shut up, not understanding how this aunt would suddenly become a mom. But if Dad needed to, he could go to the cemetery. He even liked the cemetery. Good weather. Morning, everything was green and blooming. Not many people. We approached a grave. Hi, I'm sorry we're all together, but where you are now is probably already known, his father said, pushing Dany to say hello. Hello, Mom, the son said obediently, looking at the photo of a young Emily Anderson. Alex Johnson began to set the table to put out appetizers and cognac. Here we are, more to drink. And how are we going to drive back? Jennifer said unhappily. All right, by cab. What's there to drink? Dad objected. Dany realized that he was the only one here. The grown-ups would go about their business. They handed him a candy and began to remember the deceased. But soon the wake turned into a picnic. The place is quiet. The weather is fine. The birds are singing. And the crosses and monuments all around, well, people die. Engrossed in investigating the monuments, Dany forgot who he came here with and why. He looked at the portraits, read the inscriptions, and suddenly realized that his father and Aunt Jennifer were not around. At first he wasn't frightened. The cemetery didn't seem big. He thought he would go to his relatives, but everything around him was unfamiliar. He did not dare to shout and call his father, knowing that in a cemetery one should behave quietly. An elderly woman came out from behind a bush. Grandma, help me, I'm lost, Dany almost cried, but held back, knowing that men don't cry. How did you manage? Did you come here alone? The woman smiled affectionately. No, with my dad and Aunt Jennifer. They're remembering my mom at her grave. Oh, you poor thing, you miss your mommy. Come on, let's go look for her. Dany, do you remember which way you came in? Okay, let me put it another way. You walked from the gate straight down the path to the grave. Dany explained as best he could how they walked, how many times they turned around, and it became clear to Grandma which way to look for the right grave. Soon they heard voices. The father and his mistress also grabbed the boy and argued noisily. finding out who was to blame for his disappearance. "Couldn't look after the child," Alex Johnson shouted. "I'm not your babysitter." "There was no reason to take him," Jennifer replied. Dany realized they were going to jump him, so he grabbed the arm of the grandmother he'd gotten to know. She said her name was Barbara Paulina, and you can call me Baba Barbie. "Are these yours?" she asked, surprised but wary when she heard the voices. As she approached the grave and saw the monument, she pressed her hand to her lips and whispered. Daughter Dany and Jennifer stared at their grandmother, perplexed. Alex Johnson became visibly nervous. "Where are you from?" "Barbara Paulina is here," he said. "So you've killed Emily. She didn't tell me anything about herself or that I had a grandson. What kind of man are you, Alex?" Barbara Paulina was once Alex Johnson's mother-in-law, mother of his wife Emily True. Her son-in-law had only seen her a few times in all the years of their marriage, and all encounters had been unfriendly. Barbara Paulina seriously quarreled with her daughter when she decided to marry this passerby. That's what she called her son-in-law. And Emily herself did not want to meet and communicate with her mother, ashamed of close kinship with a simple village woman. After all, Emily immediately after school went to the city, graduated from the institute, became an elegant city lady, and suddenly she was a mom. Emily was a late daughter, and her mother always looked older than her years. It was embarrassing to show her to people. Barbara Paulina felt it, resented her daughter for not inviting her mother and visiting her. What could be done? That's how they separated. Barbara knew nothing about her daughter and called her son-in-law a philanderer because she knew the man. He's rich, but are honest people like that, she thought. Hearing the accusations, Alex Johnson flared up. "Watch your language, Barbara Paulina. What do you mean mortified? Emily died of her own illness. I had nothing to do with it at all. I did everything I could to make her well." "Yes, I see. I see your everything," cried grandmother bitterly. "My wife's grave is not yet cold, and you are already drinking on it with some girl. And you are not ashamed of your child. You are not afraid of God." "How could I not, if you've been walking away from her all your life, without hiding? Because of your nervousness and hysterics, she died, poor thing. Why didn't you tell me? You knew her address, didn't let me say goodbye to my daughter." "Oh, what grief," mocked former son-in-law. "But you yourself for so many years did not want to know her, and now you're saying that I killed her. You raised her sick. She couldn't give birth. She died before her time. So it's my fault. Who else could it be? Was she healthy and happy when she lived with me? Then why did she run away from you like a plague? And how come she couldn't give birth? And who's that?" Barbara Paulina pointed to the boy. "That's not her. He's adopted. Emily couldn't." "Why do you say such things in front of the child?" The grandmother was horrified. "Or else don't go near the child, you witch. You have nothing to do with him at all," growled the father. Dany listened to the argument, shifting his gaze from his father to his grandmother. Drunken Aunt Jennifer giggled nearby, not really taking in the meaning of the conversation. The boy had always known he was adopted and wasn't particularly upset about it. It wasn't like he didn't know what it was like to live with his own family, his mother and father. And this way he at least had an explanation for why his life at home wasn't very good. And this Grandma Barbara, she just clicked with him right away. And it was a shame that Daddy was fighting with her. It would be nice if they could make up and Grandma could live with them. But they wouldn't make up. They argued and blamed each other more and more vehemently. As a result, Barbara Paulina again called her father a scoundrel, and a scoundrel hugged the boy, kissed him on the cheek and left. Still in tears, Dany looked sadly at her and almost cried himself. Would they never see each other again? Jennifer's parents began to pack up, too. Alex Johnson grumbled angrily. Where the hell had that old witch come from? Still, he was telling Dany off. Where's he been? I said around if he's wandering around the cemetery. What is this? A park or something? What are you sitting on? And then it was Jennifer, who didn't want to clean up, explaining that she'd had a bad day. Finally, we packed up, drove home. On the way home, Dany tried to find out something from Daddy, his Grandma Barbara Mommy's mom. Is she still coming to visit us? Apparently she's old. That's who. And I really hope she doesn't. I don't want to see her again, Alex Johnson said, and Dany became sad. Barbara Paulina, who was in the cemetery that day, accidentally visited the grave of an old acquaintance who had gone to the city with her children. She returned to her village, where she had worked all her life as a milkmaid. However, this was not her main occupation, and she was known far beyond her native land as a healer. No, she was neither a sorceress nor a psychic. She just knew nature well, knew herbs and knew how to prepare them. She was also familiar with some other methods of folk medicine, and all the residents of the neighborhood knew that with their ailments should go not to doctors, but to Grandmother Barbara, who had already saved many people from great misfortunes. When she returned home, she thought about how she could save herself from loneliness, and her grandson by lineage from the bad influence of her adoptive father. She blamed herself for not seeing her only daughter for so long. She hadn't helped her when she'd gotten sick. But what could she do if Emily had really run away from her, didn't want to communicate, and now she was gone? She didn't have any kids either. But this little foster kid, oh, I should take him. I should have asked Alex he would have. What's a foster kid got to do with it? Except he's already got a new girl. Maybe she'll have her own. He's a good kid. He doesn't belong with such people, thought Grandmother, and pondered, decided once again to go to the city to see her former son-in-law. And if he doesn't agree, I already know how to influence him. She thought. When she got to town and met Alex Johnson, she began to lay out her arguments to him and ask him to give Dany back. Alex, but think to yourself, why would you want him? You're young, healthy, you've got a new fiancée. What's her name? Jennifer. But she'll give you more than one child. And what do you need someone else's child for? Not forever, anyway. Please, I'm old. Maybe I'll die soon, but you can have him on the papers. He'll be yours. In the meantime, let him stay with me, lonely as I am. In fact, Alex, why don't you send him to the country? Jennifer agreed. There's fresh air there, after all. It's the beginning of summer. It'll be good for the baby, but Alex Johnson was adamant. That's all I need. I'm not going to give anyone away. My son is mine by all accounts. And I need him. And I'm asking you, apparently old, to go home. You live alone and live as you like. It's a stranger, completely. No matter how much Barbara Paulina begged, her former son-in-law disagreed and eventually kicked her out of the house. Jennifer didn't understand this, tried to argue. But here's the wrong thing to say, dear. Grandma's right. Let the child stay with her. Shut up with your advice if you don't understand anything. You don't know when you'll have another one, or if you'll have one. But I already have this one, and I need him for status and reputation. I am now, as you can see, a perfect family man in the eyes of society. I'm not abandoning my adopted son. I'm raising him as my own. He's a big boy. He's already handsome, and we look like a normal family. So I'm not giving him up, and I'm not going to give him up, no matter what you say. Barbara Paulina left their home upset, but she still had hope of getting her way. Some time ago, using her methods, she had cured a very high-ranking official, literally saved him from certain death, categorically refusing money. She didn't take any money at all for the treatment. But this man was truly grateful to the healer and promised her all possible help. Here's my address and phone number, Barbara Paulina, and if you have any difficulty, you can come to me at once. I have the means. I'll help you if you need it. You help me. I'll help you, and don't say no. It's a sin to refuse. If a person offers help from the heart. At that moment, she didn't need anything, which she told the official. But she took the phone number and address out of politeness. And so it happened. She didn't know her former son-in-law's capabilities, but she really hoped the official could still do more than Alex Johnson and help her get her grandson. She called the patron, explained the problem, and the man promised to help. He didn't fool Alex Johnson. The one knew him perfectly well and found ways to influence the situation. So soon Barbara Paulina happily returned to the village with her grandson. Dany was happy too. He was fed up with life with his father and his fiancée. He hoped it would be much more interesting with his grandmother, and he was right. In his grandmother's house, he not only got rid of the eternal scolding and reproaches of his father and his mistress, but also got acquainted with a completely new world, the village. Grandmother turned out to be kind and clever, taught him the wisdom of village life. It was perhaps more difficult than in the city, but much more interesting. Together they went to the forest, collected herbs, berries, which could save people from diseases. "Grandma, how do you know all this?" wondered the boy. "So from time immemorial I know," smiled Barbara Paulina. "My grandmother taught me when I was like you. Now I'm teaching you. And you memorize, it will always come in handy." One day, walking through the forest, they saw 3 puppies squeaking pitifully in the grass. "Oh, Grandma, someone left them here. Shall we take them away?" "No, they won't grow up to be dogs. They're wolf cubs. We won't abandon them, of course, but we can't take them home. If people see them, they'll be scared. We'll make a nest for them here. We'll go every day to feed them. You will have your own wolves who will love you and protect you." And so they did. And soon the wolves became quite tame, at least for grandmother and grandson. "But for strangers, they can be dangerous," said Barbara Paulina. "And wolves won't live in a house. For them, home is the woods." In short, Dany felt truly happy for the first time in his life, and hoped it would always be that way. His foster father, however, did not think of giving up so easily. Yes, his ex-mother-in-law's patron had put him on such terms that he had to give the boy up, and actually didn't miss Dany very much without him. But he was insulted to the core and hoped to prove it someday. And who's in charge in this life? But things didn't happen at all the way he'd planned. That is, without his involvement. He rejoiced, believing that fate itself had sided with him. Barbara Paulina had fallen ill, and not just ill, but had had a stroke. No wonder her age was more than old, because she gave birth to a daughter already not young. And here in her old age, and still such a shock, learned of Emily's death. Before that she had hoped to reconcile with her daughter. Then she fought for her grandson. She thought that taking care of him would give her strength and perhaps allow her to live longer. But it didn't. She could not help herself. She had no strength to stand up. Her arms and legs were gone, and she was almost speechless. The frightened boy rushed to the neighbors for help, and they of course did not leave them with his grandmother. But someone in good faith reported the incident to Alex Johnson. He instantly arrived, building himself a worried and concerned relative. But to take care of the former mother-in-law, understandably, was not going to. His involvement in Barbara Paulina's life was limited to the fact that he got her admitted to a hospice, and Dany took her home. "What's going to happen to Grandma now? Won't she die?" Dany worried. "I don't know," replied his father. "She was in the hospital, and she's there now. Maybe they'll cure her." Waved the father away. "I hope nothing like that happens. And we'll visit her." The son remembered that they went to the hospital for nothing. "If she gets better, she'll come back. And then you'll give me back. I liked it in the village, no, but I don't know what you could have liked there. But what's life in this wilderness with some old woman? What are you, Mowgli or something? In the city you have to live in a civilized society. Learn, get used to communicating with people. You have lived in this village only a little while, and you have already turned into some kind of savage. I don't want such a son. And if that's the case, then give me back to my grandmother, and I'll be her grandson," Dany argued. But his father paid no attention to him. He realized that in any case neither Dany nor Barbara Paulina would be able to return. He bought a certificate that her house was in a state of disrepair and posed a threat to the neighbors, eventually arranged for it to be demolished. This was very considerate, as it made Alex Johnson the master of the situation. Jennifer was not at all happy about the baby's return. She was fine in a rich house without this nuisance, quite content with no longer having to pose as the boy's loving stepmother. "Well, what did you bring him for?" she asked grudgingly. After all, they were living so well. What to do with him now? The boy is growing up. He will start hooliganizing. He will go to school. Friends will appear, and with lessons it will be necessary to help. And what are you doing? You're sitting at home anyway, doing nothing, so I'll have to babysit. He doesn't like me and doesn't listen to me. And then why don't I do anything? I don't have time to take care of this child at all. Beauty salons, fitness massage. You don't want me to turn into a fat and boring housewife, do you? Or are you being cranky in your robe, Jenny? Alex said understandingly. I see. I can't expect that from you. Okay, we'll hire a babysitter. He promised and immediately started looking for one. Soon Daisy showed up at the house. A young provincial girl, but with a teacher's education. Jennifer was worried at first. A stranger in the house is her potential competition. Who knows what Alex would think? But when she saw Daisy, she calmed down. The girl was not even a gray mouse, but some microorganism of small stature compared to her so unattractive and ungroomed. Skinny, her clothes hung hopelessly on her. Colorless, liquid hair, short, neatly cut. I don't see how anyone can let themselves get so neglected, Jennifer thought squeamishly. It's even better for me, though. I'm sure he won't be interested in one of these. Let him do the unpleasant chores of taking care of the boy. I'm thankful for that. Dany, on the other hand, didn't like his new nanny. She was a kind, cheerful girl. And it turned out they had a lot of things to talk about. Daisy had grown up in the countryside, too, and she had fond memories of it. She talked happily about her childhood, and Dany shared memories of his short time in the countryside. He told about the wolf cubs, too. Worrying about them now. I mean, they're used to us coming in with Grandma. How are they alone now? What if the hunters come upon them, Pale? The boy said. Daisy tried to reassure him. Don't be afraid. Wolves are wild, very intelligent animals. They have to live in the forest. And hunters will always manage to hide. And she told everything she knew about wolves. So don't be sad. They'll be fine. Yeah, it's not them I'm worried about anymore. It's Grandma. How's she doing in the hospital? And if she's gone, I'll be all alone. Jennifer doesn't need me at all. Especially not Dany. You saw how lonely the boy was. Fate's been cruel to him. Orphaned, probably right after he was born. Foster mom died. His father was completely indifferent to him. No stepmother to speak of. The only person close to his heart was his grandmother in the hospital. The girl already knew that Alex Johnson sent his former mother-in-law not even to a clinic, but to a hospice where people are not treated, but provide a quiet dying. And indeed, a stroke at her age is very serious. The woman's not likely to survive. Poor boy. He won't even be able to say goodbye to his grandmother. So the girl decided to help the child at her own risk. She found out the address of the hospice and said that someday they'd go there, but she couldn't say anything to Daddy and Jennifer too. They can't know, or they'll get mad and won't let them go. And they'll probably kick me out, she said. Dany was very happy and looked forward to going to the hospital to visit his grandmother. So one day, when his father and Jennifer were off for the day for an event, he and the girl hit the road. The hospice wasn't that close to their home, so the girl was in a hurry, realizing that if she didn't get back before her host returned, she would be in big trouble. But of course she didn't want that either. After all, she did not have her own place in the city, and until she got a job in this rich house, had to live in a hostel, which was not very pleasant. And the pay was decent enough, and it was a shame to leave Dany behind. Finally, they entered the room where Barbara Paulina lay motionless on the bed. Her condition had not improved, but had worsened, probably because the poor woman realized the hopelessness of her situation. It would have been naive of her to assume that her son-in-law would ever take her home, or at least let her live with him. Fortunately, she knew nothing about the demolition of her house, and therefore thought that her life was over. It was so sad that she didn't even hope to see her grandson, so she didn't try to get better. She just lay and looked at the ceiling, waiting for death. When she heard a child's voice shouting Grandma Barbara Paulina, she thought that she must have thought so. After all, she didn't expect to see and hear her grandson again. However, it was really Dany. He ran over to the bed, looked at her, always so active and now completely motionless, and burst into loud tears. Grandma, you're alive. How glad I am. I came to see you. I was afraid I would never see you again. This is the girl, my nanny. It was she who brought me here, and Papa knows nothing. And it is necessary that he should continue not to know, and will always visit you now. Grandma's left hand, which everyone thought was already motionless, suddenly rose and came down on the boy's head. Dany, I never thought I'd see you. He didn't think I'd live myself. But look, I saw you and I came alive. I thought my hands were dead a long time ago, too, but they're moving. All they had to do was touch you. How lucky I was to see you. Grandma, you'll stand up now. You'll be just like you were before, will you? You're the one who cured everyone, so you should get well. I can't do it without you." Jessica stood there wiping away her tears. The scene moved her to the core. A nurse entered and gasped in amazement. "Barbara Paulina, are you better?" She could not believe her eyes. "Better," she replied. "I think someone still needs me here. It's too early to die, of course." "You're very much needed," exclaimed the nurse. "I'll get the doctor right away. We need to keep you on your meds." "This is my main medicine," Barbara Paulina pointed to Dany, whose other arm had begun to move. "Thank you too, Jessica. Thank you for bringing your granddaughter. I wouldn't have gotten anything from that bastard, of course. He locked me in here on purpose so I could die here. Maybe it's a mercy. Otherwise, I'd have to lie at home alone, and I wouldn't have recovered there. And here I'd still be looked after. But he wouldn't let me see my grandson." "We'll come as soon as we can," Jessica said. "We snuck out here, but we won't leave you now." Everyone marveled at the sudden improvement in the patient's condition. She was far from fully recovered, of course, and many people didn't believe Barbara would ever walk again. But the fact that she could speak and use her hands was a great achievement. "The possibilities of the brain are not known," the doctor sighed. "Probably the mental shock has given her new strength. It happens, of course, but frankly, I didn't expect to see anything like this." Jessica wasn't fooled. And at the first opportunity, she and Dany began traveling to visit her grandmother at the hospice, of course, hiding everything from Alex Johnson. Jessica even warned the staff in case Alex Johnson decided to call, telling them not to tell or mention Barbara Paulina's improved health in any way. She suspected it would not please the landlord at all. The only thing she did not consider was the neighbors. Perhaps they had nothing against either the girl or her ward, and without a second thought, having stopped Alex and Jennifer in the street, began to praise them and how well they were taking care of the child. What a wonderful nanny they had found for him. "Your Dany is much more fun and active with her. She's spending a lot of time with him. You're always busy, but she's always going out with him, going somewhere." That worried Alex. He didn't know where Jessica could go with the baby. Anyway, he'd never authorized her to do anything like that. "She can take him anywhere she wants," Jennifer said, annoyed when she heard the conversation. But her husband did not agree with her, and in the evening decided to ask Jessica himself. "Where do you take the baby?" "Only where I allow," the girl replied. "At the zoo a few times have been, on the playground often go." But Alex Johnson noticed that Jessica was wary of his questions, tried to ask Dany, but got the same answer. They do not go anywhere, but only go to places where they are allowed. Realizing there was no way to get the truth, Alex Johnson decided to follow Jessica. Once, having said that he was leaving for the day, he got into his car, waited for Jessica and Dany to get out and get into the called cab, and followed them. Alex had already guessed that Jessica was taking the kid to see his grandmother without his permission. Now he just had to make sure of it. After walking them to the hospice, he didn't wait for them to come out, but made a scandal at home in the evening. "Jessica, I know all about your self-rule. Why did you take the baby to the hospice?" Alex asked. "I'm sorry, Alex Johnson. Dany misses his grandmother so much, so I decided to take him to her without letting you know. I know how you feel about Barbara Paulina, but it made Dany very happy," Jessica replied, realizing it was useless to deny it. "I'd kill you for that. Why take your child to that old woman who is a stranger to him, lies there like a log? I don't think it's good for my son to visit such places." Alex was indignant. "You're wrong to say that," Jessica disagreed. "Dany's been much more cheerful since seeing his grandmother. He cares for her a lot, and Barbara Paulina is feeling better. She's not lying like a log anymore, and she's even getting up. The doctors say seeing her grandson has been the best medicine for her. And this is how you try to heal this old witch yet?" "And I asked for this," Alex asked angrily. "You know about our relationship, so why are you prying into domestic matters?" He couldn't calm down. "I'm not. But it really does make everyone feel better that Dany is visiting Nana," Jessica replied. "What business is it of yours anyway? You dare to take your child where you're not asked to go and argue about it. But I'm not going to tolerate that in my house. Leave at once, and you'll get your settlement now." Dany, hearing his father's words, ran up to him. "Daddy, don't. Please don't kick Jessica out. I won't feel good without her." "Are you still going to get in the way that you're going to feel bad, that you won't go to Grandma's anymore?" That grandmother isn't your grandmother. She's just a witch. You'll be fine without her. And if you cry, I'll lock you in your room so you won't go anywhere," Alex threatened. Jessica, swallowing her tears, gathered her things and quietly comforted Dany. "Don't cry, buddy. You and I will see each other again sometime. We'll go to Grandma's. I don't know how yet, but I'll think of something. Make sure you take me with you." "Okay then," the boy pleaded. "I don't want to stay here. I don't feel good here. You can see that. Let's live together somewhere." "That's impossible. Your dad will take you away from me anyway, and that will only make it worse. They could put me in jail for that," the nanny explained. She had to leave after all, and Dany was locked in a room. But luckily, the room was on the first floor. He saw Jessica leave through the window. He could hear his father still raging somewhere in the back of the house, berating Jennifer for not wanting to watch the baby, which was why he had to hire all kinds of con artists. Taking advantage of the noise he was making, the boy slowly opened the window, jumped out, and rushed in the same direction Jessica had gone. He caught up with her. "Don't chase me away, please, Jessica. I'm not coming home anyway, and no one will know I left with you instead of running away. I'll only have enough for dinner, or maybe even later in the morning, only we can go anywhere in that time." Jennifer couldn't go anywhere in particular with Dany. She lived in a dormitory, but she didn't know if they had left a bunk for her there. And besides, she could only live there by herself. Dany couldn't be taken. Fine. They'd live somewhere else. She didn't know where, but she didn't care. She was ready to live on the street, as long as it wasn't at home, Dany begged. But of course she couldn't stay on the street. She persuaded the dormitory manager to let her stay in a small room with the boy for the time being. He agreed. But Alex Johnson wasn't so simple. Soon the whole town was plastered with pictures of Jessica and Dany. The ad said the nanny had stolen the child and was holding him by force. The commandant, of course, noticed such an ad too and became outraged. He appeared to Jessica. "What on earth are you doing? Young lady, not only have you become a criminal yourself, but you are making me look like a harborer. I don't want to go to jail. I won't report you, of course, but you must leave immediately with the child. And my advice to you is to get back to his father quickly. Then there will probably be no repercussions for you." Jessica wasn't going to take that advice. She couldn't give the boy to a father like that, and not just because Dany had begged so fervently for it. She realized for herself the child was not well in a home where he was not loved, and where already, naturally, he would never see his grandmother Barbara Paulina again. She didn't know how they would be able to visit Barbara Paulina, because they were probably already being guarded at the hospice. She didn't even know where she and Dany would go now. Not only did they have no shelter, but there was danger on all sides. Anyone could point her out as a child abductor. Trying to avoid that, she decided to get out of town, and soon she and Dany found themselves on the edge of the city. But even there, they almost got caught. Jessica and the boy were walking down the street when she suddenly spotted a police car in the distance. It didn't bode well. Trying to avoid an unwanted encounter, she popped into a convenience store. The police officers, seeing her, were already on their way to the same place. "Young lady, please," the owner addressed her. "I see you've wandered in here by mistake." He recognized her too. He had seen the ad, but he did not give her away. On the contrary, he opened the door of the back room and said, "Go in there. I'll try to get rid of them." Jessica and the child hid, and just in time. The police were already entering the store. A woman with a boy just came in. She is suspected of a crime. The child has been kidnapped. Where did they go? "Oh, really? What kidnapping? It was my wife and son. No one kidnapped the child." "It's our own son," he replied. "And where did they go?" "They went through the back door. It's quicker that way, to the house. I live over there on the other side of the store." The cops, realizing they had made a mistake, left, and the shopkeeper came in and addressed Jessica. "Well, there are no more cops, but you'll have to explain what the kidnapping is. For what purpose?" He said, already realizing that this was not a simple case. "Jessica didn't kidnap me. I ran away on my own," Dany blurted out. "I don't want to go home. I'd rather live on the streets." "Yes, that is indeed true," Jessica confirmed. "Jessica didn't kidnap him. the girl said tiredly. You can turn us into the police, of course, but that won't make anyone better off. And she told her story briefly. The shopkeeper's name was Nicholas Victorson. He was impressed. I understand now why you ran away. Stuff happens in life. You know what? Stay at my place for now. My house is small, but there's plenty of room for everyone. And then maybe we'll arrange it so that this so-called father won't have any views on you. After all, there's some way to undo the adoption, if it could be proven that the boy wasn't doing well in the adoptive parent's home. I don't know any of that yet. I don't know about legal matters, but you can ask the experts, Jessica said. And why did you decide to help us? She asked. Yes, because I know what misfortune is. My wife died in a car accident a year ago. We were expecting a baby. So Nicholas waved goodbye, and Jessica actually understood him. Indeed, a man who had suffered such a tragedy might well be sympathetic to her, and Dany he didn't. The only thing Nicholas hadn't admitted was that he liked Jessica. He was even surprised, since he hadn't looked at any woman with interest since his wife's death. But this small, fragile girl had made an immediate impression for some reason. Of course, he was not going to confess his feelings at once. He didn't dare to admit it to himself. But he couldn't leave them without help. And not only because of personal sympathy. He just believed them and sympathized with them. Nicholas lived in a small cottage of his own, where he put Jessica and Dany. It wasn't safe for them to go out yet, but he had, as promised, begun to look for ways to save them from Alex Johnson, who would surely not give up his attempts to get his son back and punish his nanny. Dany and Jessica got used to their new abode fairly quickly, and the boy often talked about how much he wished his grandmother could live with them. Nicholas, having learned his grandmother's story from them, called the hospices himself, and learned that Barbara Paulina was soon to be discharged and had already recovered sufficiently, no longer terminally ill and quite capable of living on her own. That would be joyous news, and she certainly could if she had a home. But there was no home now. Which she had been told about quite by accident. She had called a neighbor to ask how things were going, and learned that the house had been torn down. Barbara Paulina was confused. Her situation was once again unenviable. Dany and Jessica never came to see her again. Alex Johnson wasn't returning her calls, and she didn't know where she would go after she was discharged. But Jessica and Nicholas found out she had to check out, and they decided to take Barbara Paulina in. Dany was overjoyed. He was happy to know that he would be near his grandmother again. They lived not quite in the country, but not quite in the city either. But Jessica was still worried that someone was looking for them, realized that eventually Alex Johnson would get his way and find them. Yeah, it wasn't hard. The boy couldn't have been in the house all the time. If he was, someone must have seen him. Eventually, Alex Johnson got word of the whereabouts of the men he was looking for. He went to the address given, but met there, not with his son or even his babysitter, but with a shopkeeper from his former mother-in-law. We would encourage you, Alex Johnson, to drop your claim. You're not getting the boy anyway. Alex Johnson stated threateningly, if you keep coming in here and demanding things, we'll have some information against you that will make you leave us alone. Barbara Paulina backed him up. Yes, Alex, we've already talked to the lawyers. You demolished my house illegally. It's already known. I'm not going to report you anywhere yet, but if you show up again, leave us alone altogether. Do you need a boy? You have a young wife, Jennifer. You may have a native child soon. Why do you need all this? You have a lot more to lose if you keep insisting on what you want. Barbara saying, we'll see about that. I can't accept it, Alex objected. We'll see who loses what. Good, I'll leave you alone for now. But don't relax. Rest. Build up your strength. You'll have to fight more serious people soon. He wasn't going to turn to anyone. Alex decided to handle it himself, not leave his ex-mother-in-law, his nanny, and Dany alone. We'll see. We'll see, he grumbled angrily to himself as he drove away from the hated house. It was clear that the first thing Nick had lost was Victor. He lost his store, burned to the ground with all the goods, and after all, it was the only source of his small but steady income. The cause of the accident was not a mystery to Nick. He realized that Alex Johnson had set the fire, but there was no way to prove it. As a result, he was left without money and with huge debts. But Nick was not going to give in to despair, decided to work and earn as he could. It's not like he was always a store owner or a salesman. He had a pretty good construction degree to support his suddenly shattered family. He went to work on a construction site and had considerable success there. But success is unreliable and construction is a dangerous place. And one day, a new misfortune befell him. He suffered a spinal injury, leaving him disabled. It was a real disaster. Barbara Paulina cried, "Oh, Nick, if I had been like I used to be, I would have lifted you up. And now what? All my medicine is left there in the house. There's nothing left at home. Yes, and there's no strength in my arms anymore. And how to live now? I can't imagine," she lamented. "What can I do?" "So I'll be an invalid. We'll try to survive on my pension somehow," Nick replied. Jessica started looking for a job, realizing that she would hardly earn enough to support 2 sick people and 1 growing boy. And then something happened that no one expected. Alex Johnson wasn't going to accept defeat. No, he didn't really want the baby back either. After living without the boy for a while, he'd come to appreciate the pleasures of a free life. He and Jennifer began to quarrel less, quietly could go anywhere, without thinking about who to leave Dany with. Yes, and in general, there's enough trouble from a child, even a calm and trouble-free one. So he's just a little kid, and he'll grow up and show it, Alex pondered. So let's not take him. Let him sit with his grandmother. It's your business. At least he'd be his own, Jennifer hummed in never, and he mostly agreed with her. Besides, he was afraid to get involved with the men who'd taken Dany with this Nick guy. There were no witnesses to him burning down the store. But who knows? He decided to deal with his enemies in a different way, namely to make sure they didn't get Dany, and most importantly, his ex-mother-in-law. Why would he want the boy? Alex Johnson didn't understand, but if he did, he decided to make sure Dany was taken away from her, and then let the old witch dance. He thought gloatingly, and that's what he had in mind. After all, he knew that his adopted son had relatives, so the mother died in childbirth or immediately after. The father's unknown, but the grandparents are well-to-do. The daughter was released as usual, and she ran off with some man, either a biker or something else, basically a tramp with no name. Her parents looked for her, but they never found her, so they didn't see her for a long time and didn't know anything about her. Then from somewhere came the news that the daughter gave birth, died, and the boy, their grandson, in an orphanage. Started looking for a child and found only when Alex Johnson and Emily had all the documents for adoption were formalized. Emily, as soon as she heard that the child, whom she already considered her own, could be taken away, almost went crazy. Alex Johnson, then the director of the maternity hospital, paid a lot of money to keep the story quiet. They took her for their own good. I should have known it would go down like this. But I wrote down the address and all the details of those grandparents because I knew they'd come in handy. Once again, I marveled at my foresight and decided to tell these unfortunate people where their grandchild was. I had already found out who these people were through my own channels. The grandfather is such that he not only has a lot of money, but his connections are such that he knows all the ministers. The governor is his best friend. The kind of people that crazy Barbara Paulina obviously won't mess with. Neither the nanny nor the owner will even talk to them. She'll take her grandson away, and that'll be the end of it. Taking out the cherished phone number, Alex Johnson dialed it. "Dear Vyacheslav Dmitrievich, I'm sorry to bother you, but the matter is very important. As I know, you were looking for your grandson, your daughter Julia's son." He started the conversation politely. "What do you want?" The older man said in a strained voice, "You don't know me." "That's hardly important, but I do know. Don't ask me where your grandson is from. His name is Dany, by the way. Apparently some nice people adopted him after your father. But then the mother died and the child was taken away from his father. What can you prove what you say?" The elderly businessman was in no hurry to believe. "Why are you just calling to tell me this? You'll have to go after the boy yourself, take his DNA, and then everything will be clear. I don't think you'll have any trouble taking him away from some marginalized people who might be using him for their own nefarious purposes." "Okay, and what do I owe you for giving me the address of his whereabouts?" Vyacheslav Dmitrievich asked, suspecting that he was dealing with another swindler, but it turned out not to be so. "No, not a single penny. I was forced to call you by compassion and concern for the poor boy's fate. The only thing is, you'll have to hurry. If they move the child to a new place, it will be hard to find him." "Well, thank you." "If it's not a joke, of course," said Vyacheslav Dmitrievich, already somewhat confused. The fact that the caller did not ask for money inspired some confidence in his words. "Well, who is joking like that? I understand you need to find your only grandson. I am, you might say, a volunteer, a private person, a gratuitous do-gooder." Already hanging up the phone, Alex Johnson rubbed his hands together. He probably should have gotten at least some money from that old man. But no. And it was my intuition that didn't fail me. It's not worth getting involved. Now we can forget about this case with peace of mind. He was sure he'd done the right thing. He probably did. Only Dany's meeting with his grandparents brought something strange to those around him. Vyacheslav Dmitrievich arrived at Nikolai's house with his wife and a security guard. He expected that he would get into some brothel, where anything can happen, but the door was opened to him by a nice, fragile girl. When she heard why he was here, she nodded in agreement. "Yes, I have Dany, but I didn't kidnap him. He left his foster father's family and doesn't want to go back. I don't think he will. His grandmother is here, and Nicholas and I are ready to adopt him." She took them to a small, cozy and tidy house. She introduced them to Dany. The grandmother's own grandmother ran crying to the boy. "She looked just like Julia," she exclaimed. "Look, Vyacheslav, Dany, my boy, and I am your grandmother." She hugged the child, but Dany pulled away and said politely, "My grandmother is here. Here she is, Grandma Barbara Paulana." Vyacheslav Dmitrievich, looking around the furnishings of the house of two invalids, a man and a grandmother, not at all like the kidnappers, said, "I seem to have been misled not about the boy's parentage, but about how he came to you and in what conditions he is kept." Jessica invited the guests to sit down at the table, and everyone told their part of the story. "What can I say? Friends, thank you for not leaving our Dany in trouble, for giving him a chance to live normally," said Vyacheslav. "The fact that he is our grandson is clear without DNA, although we need to analyze it. The other question is, what should we do next? I can't leave the boy here, but to tear him away from you would be cruel." "No, we'll take him, we'll take the boy," cried the grandmother, clinging to her grandson. "Wait with tears," stopped her Vyacheslav. "I propose this, get together. All together we will move to us. We have a large house empty. There I'll take care of medical care for Nicholas and Barbara Paulina, and then we'll see how things go from there." And then everything changed in their lives with incredible speed. Vyacheslav Dmitrievich found doctors and paid for Nikolai's treatment. After rehabilitation, he was able to lead a full life. Having recovered, he married Jessica and engaged in the restoration of his business. Barbara Paulina, whose health also significantly improved, stayed to live with Dany's relatives. The boy never wanted to part with her. She longed for her former life, for her home in the village, but it was no longer there. Dany also did not forget the happy time spent with his grandmother in the village. Vyacheslav Dmitrievich had to take care of it. He built a new house in the village, which was to become a summer cottage for everyone, and for the boy's relatives, and for Barbara Paulina, and of course, for Nikolai and Jessica. And as for Alex Johnson, everything turned out much sadder for him, but not because of the people he tried so hard to ruin his life. Dany's family had long since forgotten about him, cut him out of their memories, out of their lives. Happy people don't need revenge. He screwed up his life on his own, almost unaided, realizing that his actions made everything the other way around, adjusted the fate of his enemies. He decided to give up and do his own thing. Finally proposed to Jennifer, prepared for the wedding, but did not intend to part with old habits. He had another mistress, also Jennifer. The deceived woman was that soon she would become a legal spouse. Jennifer found out about the adventures of her fiancé and demanded that he stop this relationship. Alex Johnson didn't even think of denying it, of calming his beloved. "Aren't you a little early to start disposing and attacking the future lawful wife? Not allowing me anything? What are you? If you don't like it, there's the door, there's the threshold, go away. You think I want to marry you so badly. If you leave, I'll marry someone else. Her name's Jennifer, too, by the way. Well, that's very convenient." Jennifer started to scandalize, but quickly realized that so she will only achieve the final breakup. That didn't scare her anymore, though. She realized what kind of life awaited her with this man, and it didn't suit her in any way. But she spent enough time with him to learn something about the machinations of the one she used to call her common-law husband, and she was not going to keep this information secret. She simply turned to the appropriate authorities who dealt with them. Before that, of course, she took out of the house that seemed most valuable. Alex Johnson went to trial, and Jennifer to look for another husband, more reliable. The arrested man found himself without any support. He tried to turn to one mistress and another, but they quickly explained that they need a man not to carry packages to him. So Alex Johnson was in for a long and unhappy time in a place not so remote.